Finally a way out. What happened to me? I was just fine.
Thank you. Willily take that. I will make a contract with you.
No. This is mine. Give it here.
How naive of you. Goodbye.
Booze. This guy was able to get up after something like that. He's crazy.
One day on Earth, a tree with a golden glow took root. It was given the name Yggdrasil, and in one moment it grew to an unprecedented size and encompassed all living things around it. And then it created a new world that was based on different game genres. Thanks to Yggdrasil, a world called the Labyrinth was created, which contained many different mysteries and secrets. The people of this world called it by their own name, the Game of God, although not everyone could become a player in it. After all, there were also ordinary workers who worked hard, and at that moment they were warned over the loudspeaker that if they took anything for themselves without asking again, they would be immediately fired. Not all employees liked this statement. Instead of nicknames, everyone had their own number, and one of the workers, after finishing work, came up to 7,017 and said that he had worked hard that day. He also added that they hadn't had any nice things for a long time, so he offered to buy him this thing at a very good price, namely, this tiny data transmitter. But the worker immediately warned that it was not made from real data, and there was a small risk that it could be discovered, but this did not mean that it was less effective. But this did not interest 7,017, and he simply pushed the worker and left without saying a word, which was very disappointing to him, but he still understood that this guy was just an unknown newcomer. People often told him behind his back that he was just like everyone else. Usually after work, 7,017 walked the streets of this unusual city, which were full of homeless people who just did what they could to ask for food. There was a guy approaching a random box store. Opening the door, one could hear the discontent of visitors with words about returning their points. Inside, people spent their time playing slot machines in the hopes of winning prizes. The guy came there to play too, because this miracle machine gave out everything that existed in that world. Its name was Radnomni Yasha. After the guy approached her, she greeted him and recognized him as an unknown player. 7,017 knew that legal games attracted people, because with their help you could quickly get rich. That's why he decided to try his luck. SS rank account creation card. When asked if he wanted to spin the 10, the guy immediately and decisively said that he was ready, because it was his only hope. With ringing music and bright animation, the prize began to fall out in front of him, an rank toothbrush, and since it didn't interest the guy at all, he simply continued on. Time passed, and the unnecessary objects that he knocked out filled more and more of the space behind him. Time after time he failed, because all the items that dropped were N rank. After some time, he managed to win even an R-level prize. But he still didn't care about that because he would be happy to just get an SR or SSR rank item. The guy couldn't even remember how many times he had already tried his luck, but he still hoped to knock out that very rare item. All that was in front of his eyes was his mother, for the sake of which he tried to knock out this item. Suddenly, for a second, his eyes froze from incomprehensible sparks, all because a very bright light began to emanate from the random box screen. He couldn't even imagine that the very same SR item could appear in front of him. After all, the chance of it happening was 1 in a million. SSR prize looked. The guy was shocked that it was SSR in front of him, because at first it seemed to him that it was an SR rarity item in front of him. Previously, he thought that he would never be so lucky, since it was difficult for him to imagine such a miracle even in his dreams. Yet, thanks to his persistence and perseverance in seeing the matter through to the end, he was generously rewarded. A card that allowed you to create an account. In the magical labyrinth Yggdrasil, that's where he could use it. And he had only one way to gain access to that place. This is to use the avatar of the game account to get into another reality. An avatar was a virtual body that never appeared in the real world, but this method was the only way to transport objects from the labyrinth to the outside world. And the objects of the virtual world, going beyond the boundaries of reality, are what changed their world, after which shuttle trade became completely dependent on Yggdrasil. And the players who led his era were important representatives of society. But this qualification was not available to everyone, but only to a limited number of people. So the guy ran as fast as he could with joy. After all, he managed to get the opportunity to become a player. And now he could start from scratch. All he had to do was register his account in the central zone. Suddenly, while he was about to do this, he woke up on the ground. He didn't understand what had happened and why he was lying down, and at that moment, there were still sounds of some people asking their boss if this was the right guy. The boss said that this was exactly the one they needed, because in front of them was a lucky guy who pulled out an SSR item. But his people thought that maybe the guy was unlucky, because they managed to catch him. One of the jocks said that it was indeed the one who had the ability to create an account, and he thought it was a good catch for the evening. The boss himself was surprised because before he had only seen this on lists, but now he was happy, because the card was his, and now he could do what he had wanted for a long time. Suddenly, the guy at my feet said words in which he demanded that his card be returned. The boss told this stranger that he was a liar and that this map did not belong to him, and then he asked his guys to do their job. And even at such a difficult moment for the guy, he still continued to demand the return of what belonged to him. But the boss's men were completely lenient with him and never gave the guy the answer he wanted. But that didn't stop him from continuing to demand and stand his ground. At the time, the boss's guards wondered, was this kid really planning to start a new life? The boss told him that if he bought anything from someone else's store, he should pay a commission. Putting his finger on the guy's forehead, he suddenly began to give off a magical impulse, after which he added that he had made an honest deal with the guy. And for taking the card, he had to transfer 30,000 points to this guy's account. And then the guy was doomed, because he understood that this thing could only be knocked out once. The boss said that the transfer of funds was complete, and since the guy accepted it, he could do whatever he wanted from that moment on. After that, the guy decided to lie down for a while. At that moment, in the background, he heard these people who did not understand what had happened to the weather and were also deciding on a celebratory banquet in honor of getting a valuable item. Suddenly, for a second, the guy moved his hand. Then the jock noticed something else and told his boss about it. He said that this guy still hadn't learned his lesson. The boss was most surprised that he was able to get up at all after that. At that moment, a warning came to the guy that his vital signs had dropped, so he should quickly visit the nearest medical facility. But he ignored it, and only continued to look at those violators who had thus exchanged his item. Watching this, the boss did not understand why this fool behaved like this. Perhaps he was not satisfied? But suddenly the guy turned away from them and started walking towards the random box store, which greatly surprised the boss and his workers. They suspected that he was planning to get another SSR rarity item, which was impossible. They shouted at him from behind that they wanted to make another deal if he hit another card. The jock wondered what they would do if something happened to that guy, but the boss thought that nothing would happen to them for it, because the guy was not an influential person. Meanwhile, there was still a sign in front of him that stated his vital signs were low. At that moment, he really felt, to put it mildly, not very well. Walking to the store, his head was spinning, and all the people around him seemed to blur. But no matter what, he still intended to take what was his. As soon as the machine greeted him, an awkward moment happened, because the guy was knocked off his feet. However, his hand still continued to reach for the start button. He pressed the gotcha button over and over again to do it again. But then he became despondent when he saw more and more unnecessary objects in front of him. He still had the warning sign of low numbers that had not led to good results hanging in front of his face. Suddenly, the boss was covered by a bright flash of light that came from the Yggdrasil tree, which surprised him because he did not understand what was happening. Due to the emergency situation and the critical condition of the owner, extreme life-saving measures were taken, and then the forced transformation of symbols began, after which the system asked to enter the character's name. The guy found himself in pitch darkness and stood as if he were in front of a court, which surprised him. He didn't understand why he was handcuffed, since he hadn't committed any crimes. Then a voice from the darkness said that he had been expelled from the guild for leaking confidential information. He was angry and began to justify himself, saying that this could not be and that they had confused him with someone else. But from the darkness came only the words that by the court's decision, he was found guilty, so they wanted to deprive him of such a legendary title. Suddenly the guy noticed that something was wrong with his voice. The two ghosts who appeared congratulated him and said that this was only the beginning of his unknown life. The guy thought it was unfair and wanted to challenge the decision because he didn't do it. All he could think about was how he needed to earn enough money to pay for his mother's operation. Suddenly, a voice from the darkness told 7017 that it was time for him to wake up. In the blink of an eye, the guy suddenly moved in time. He didn't understand what this bright and at the same time wet place was in front of him. 7017 considered it some kind of fantasy and still did not understand how he got there at all. Suddenly, a system appeared in front of him, which scared the guy. However, it asked him to enter the name of his character. The guy was stunned to see this thing flying, and he assumed it was a robot vacuum cleaner, which was not the case, and she considered it a rude remark towards her. She said that she was the Yuguan random box system, after which she congratulated the guy on becoming her master. After all, 7017 was the only one in the world who could get UR rank. Hearing this, he was shocked, because previously the guy thought that the rarities of gacha were limited only to ranks N, R, SR, and SRR. But as it turned out, this was completely wrong, and he was the only one who found out about it. The system reported that he was currently between reality and the world of Yggdrasil, and the reason she needed the master's name was to complete the registration and gain access to the labyrinth. The guy knew that to register, you needed an avatar created using a game account, and that this limit of human technology had nothing to do with him. The system said that because he was a master in a critical condition, she had to use her power to help, and now he was in a state where his body was voluntarily transformed to access Yggdrasil. So she asked her master again to enter her character's name. The guy still couldn't understand whether it was a dream or if everything was really happening, but no matter what, he realized that this was his chance. He finally entered his name, which sounded like Ryuki, and after the setup was complete, a bright glow appeared in front of him again. Then, the system announced that they were going into the labyrinth. When access was opened, Ryuki saw the very labyrinth with his own eyes for the first time, the expanses of which were unusually beautiful and were called a fantasy world. For the first time in a long time, the boy felt a pleasant breeze on his hair, and also solid ground under your feet. He was incredibly happy, because the simulations on the monitor that he saw could never compare to this landscape. Immediately after such a pleasant moment, the guy noticed a bunch of ghostly skeletons moving towards him. Ryuki certainly didn't think that upon arriving in the new world he would be greeted like this. He started running, because what other options could an untrained guy have? And he thought it was an ugly act on the part of the system to throw him onto the battlefield like that. The skeletons were level 1. They were undead whose bodies no longer existed, but malice had seeped into their bone marrow, but they were still weak to physical attacks. However, for Ryuki, it was a disaster, and the boy began to call the status window that appeared, asking the master not to upset him, because it was too shameful. Ryuki wanted to know about the weapon because he thought it should have come with him when he became a player. The system reported that the master was not a specific player of the labyrinth, so his other systems, including this one, were not applicable to him. In other words, the guy simply couldn't get the level, status, and many other things from the fantasy world. Having learned about this, the guy didn't understand why everything worked so strangely. The system told me that this labyrinth was on a completely different level, and here you had to spin a random box to get something. After entering the Yuguan system, the boy read the rules, which stated that if he entered it every day for a week, he would be given 1 SR level ticket. She also reported that the speed of issuing items in the fantasy world had been increased. From UR's achievements, Yuguana had 1 completed for which he was entitled to a reward in the form of a ticket to the labyrinth, and from the accessories, there was a reward of 5 tickets. And just for completing this registration, the guy received as many as 105 tickets, so he immediately began to use everything to increase the chances of getting something rarer. He really wanted to believe that the weapon would fall, because there was an army of skeletons behind him. Suddenly, a bright object appeared in his hands. Ryuki happily stopped and told the skeletons to attack. He hoped that their bones would go into the broth as ramen. But suddenly, one of the skeletons easily broke his item, which was obvious, because he was holding an N-rank toilet brush in his hands. The guy was so carried away that he didn't even look at the item that fell to him, and was upset by such a setup from random boxes. He blamed the system for everything, because it was its fault that there were so many unnecessary items in the boxes. But the system was only surprised in response. It itself did not understand how, being at UR rank, it was possible to pull out such a thing. It considered him a loser. While running away from enemies, the guy continued to open random boxes, and he again got a strange item in the form of a wig of N rank. By the way, it was a good way to hide his baldness. And while Ryuki was focused on the valuable item falling out, the system couldn't help but warn him that he should watch his step. Unfortunately, she said it a little late, and the guy got slightly hurt. In the meantime, the ghostly skeletons had already managed to catch up with him, which did not make him happy at all. Unexpectedly for him, the box next to him began to emit a bright glow. This was exactly what he needed, a short sword of R level, with which the guy immediately began to defend himself. After so many tries, he was pleased that he had finally gotten something normal. Now he no longer intended to run away, but immediately got down to business. Ryuki was more than confident that he could defeat everyone without any experience in sword fighting. But the attacking skeleton didn't think so when it pierced his shoulder, which surprised the guy, because he thought it should have worked. He understood that the skeleton's health should have been destroyed in just 2 blows, but the short sword's strength was not enough for that. The system decided to remind him that the master could not use the labyrinth system, and such a combat ability, as well as health, was no exception. The guy was becoming increasingly disappointed in the system, because it had already said everything at the wrong time more than once. He didn't understand how, with such a wonderful chance in his life, he could end up like this. These thoughts did not give him hope. On the contrary, they only motivated him to win. Even the fact that he was cornered couldn't stop him. So he repelled the attack and was determined to deal with everyone. Suddenly, something really surprised him, namely, that a bright glow appeared behind him, which was a skill. And then Ryuki realized that skills could also drop with random boxes, but he was confused by the fact that they did not exist in the fantasy world. He received Parry SR rank, which allowed him to parry attacks, and the Sword Mastery skill SR rank, which meant that when equipped, he could master the sword. The system is always on time. She said that this random Yuguan box was not subject to any system restrictions. In other words, even skills could drop. Then the guy thought that he could have been lucky, because anything could have happened. This was his first time using the sword parry skill. The wig fell off the skeleton, which he was so worried about that he tried to catch it. But he didn't need this anymore, since Ryuki's attack cut him in 2. And by the way, this was done precisely with the help of the sword mastery skill. The guy was stunned by the fact that he was the one who could freely use skills that did not exist in the labyrinth system, because he was allowed to ignore its laws and restrictions. For the first time, the system praised him and said that this was how Yggdrasil's balance looked. She was surprised and said that she had not doubted him from the very beginning. After all, he was the person who managed to obtain the UR rank. She also reported that he managed to obtain an SSR rank item on the very first day. Now a smile finally appeared on Ryuki's face, because luck was on his side. So he was no longer worried that another mistake could happen at that moment. Meanwhile, there were already several skeletons attacking him behind him. Turning around, Ryuki decided to take advantage of the new item's chance and defeat everyone in one blow. It was World of Phantasm is abbreviated as WAP. Where was the masterpiece of the gaming industry from the game production company Ratira, the goal of which was for absolutely every player to take first place in the labyrinth. At this point, Ryuki was still fighting the skeletons. And then a magic core fell out of one of them, which, by the way, the guy didn't immediately notice. And he, having already defeated everyone, began to be content with his first victory. The system reported that there were 7 skeletons killed, from which 5 magic cores fell, and also that the experience points earned were converted into RP, which meant random box points. The guy didn't quite understand how it worked, and then the system told him that they were used instead of experience, since the master didn't have a level system yet. Having calculated, the guy was surprised because one skeleton was worth 150 RP, and he destroyed as many as 15 of them. Then the guy remembered that he had one last box left, from which an SSR level card fell out. Each time Ryuki was more and more surprised, and then the system became curious whether the master still could not believe in this reality. After all, if it was so much for him, then he was not worthy of such a reward. Ryuki said that he wanted this box to be closed for a while, which surprised the system, and it wanted to know why he decided that. At that moment, the guy thought about the fact that he could destroy his guild with such power, and until then he decided to keep this power a secret. A system add-on was released that offered him to increase his sword skill by using his 700 RP. The effect of this would activate when he repelled an enemy attack. The rest of the guy's skills were at the initial level. Since Ryuki had 700 RP skill points left, he thought that he could take a detour to meet the skeletons again. And he was right, because there were twice as many of them as last time. This time he was glad to see them, because he wanted to quickly improve his skills. Timing was key for this guy when it came to fighting. This time he really got excited in the fight, because from the outside it looked terrifying. During this time, the system reported that it was the 3rd day of entry into WAP. He managed to complete many missions, such as defeating 10 monsters, spinning in gacha, and getting 10 items dropped by monsters, for which he received tickets from all the tasks. He realized that time in the labyrinth passed 10 times faster than in reality, and that was only 7 hours, during which he managed to get 1,500 RPE, which he considered a pretty good result. The system was pleasantly surprised, because the master managed to get 10 gachas in a row at the training ground. And all this time she was buzzing like a robot vacuum cleaner about how he got the gacha. At that moment, Ryuki was already thinking about the fact that he needed to improve his sword skills, and his parry skills should also be improved. Suddenly, the system cried out in surprise, not understanding what the master was doing. She just couldn't believe that he would spend his precious RP on some skills, to which the guy replied that the skill system was also his ability. Afterwards, he became curious. What was the probability of the ranks appearing? And then the system gave the following indicators. Rank N, 70%, rank R, 27%, SSR, rank 2 and 7%, and SSR, only 1.503%. Suddenly, Ryuki started complaining by showing the results of all the tickets he had recently received as a reward, and they were all crap. But the system only wondered if he had managed to win SR and SSR with the first tickets. The system began asking its master to give it the points that the guy had worked so hard to earn, because it needed them more than the tickets. The guy only replied that the tickets were enough to open a new box. Then the system asked how long he planned to stay in this forest. After all, since the area was a training one, the quality of the monsters he fought was low. The guy answered that he needed a weapon, and his skill levels were not pumped up enough. And he prided himself on knowing more about WAP than anyone else. That's why Ryuki believed that he should have used all his information to level up in the forest, since there were opponents that matched his level. But there were also downsides because this zone was a one-way traffic zone, into which the guy would not be able to return if he left the forest. He was curious to see how far he could advance without adjusting his level and status, and he also mentioned that he might be able to obtain an SR rank ticket for a more serious mission. After some time, the guy received a 7th-day entry bonus in the form of 1 Yuguan ticket SR. Ryuki wanted to finally level up, so he found another skeleton and defeated it. By that time, his skills were as follows. Swordsmanship had increased to level 3. Parrying was exactly the same as attack breakthrough, but the temporary improvement in reflexes was only at level 2. Ryuki believed that this was the limit of the skill he could achieve there, so he was thinking about moving on to the next stage. The system reminded him that it was time to open a new random box, which the guy agreed with. Still, he thought it was just his luck, and he hoped that when he confirmed the SR, he wouldn't get some ordinary thing. When opened, the box sparkled so brightly that its light filled the entire space. Ryuki assumed that in front of him was something incredible, which could be called a WAP pickup. He got a SR-level sword pistol. The type of such a weapon was bayonet, and in the guy's opinion, it completely destroyed the worldview of this game. He immediately began to put it into action to see the power it was capable of. As it turned out, with one swing it was capable of destroying a tree, the trunk of which was enormous. Even if you take into account his skill, the guy considered the weapon to be quite powerful, and he really liked the fact that the blade was long, because it was difficult to fight with the former. Suddenly, he became very interested in the question, what would happen if he died there? If he transformed his body, would something happen to him in real life? The system responded that if something happened to the master, he could be revived using the backup copy of Yggdrasil. However, she warned in advance that this process was very painful. Hearing this, the guy was happy, and this so-called process did not frighten him at all. After that, he said that he wanted a gacha for all the remaining tickets, as he wanted to improve his fighting power. This time, he got something that could be used. It was a set of R-rank leather armor. Suddenly, Ryuki decided to ask about the fact that the system skipped his training and immediately threw him into hunting. In its defense, the system said that it was a training ground, and although it made a mistake with the coordinates, it sent him to the system, which the guy considered fair, and since he was already more advanced, he asked the system to record all his gaming achievements from that moment on. She wondered if he had a desired name for the files. Then the guy said to call it The Story of No Name Escape from the Deep Sea. But he wondered, what was the purpose of the first video? After all, Yggdrasil created a labyrinth more exquisite than the originals it absorbed. Although most of the Razzia games were mass-produced and full of all sorts of nonsense, and they said that it was a worthy work concerning this place. While walking, the guy remembered something. Namely, that the boss of the second half of the game could appear in an early area. Which is exactly what happened, and this giant appeared right in front of the guy. The system reported information about the enemy. It said that in front of him was the Dark Knight of Chaos. After he received the blessing of the demonic god of chaos, he was expecting the strongest opponents in his tower. The system gave the guy a mission where he had to kill this Dark Knight ghost, which would reward him with 10 Yuguan tickets and 1 Yuguan ticket, SR, rank. It was unexpected for Ryuki, but he even liked it, because the experiment began from that moment. Suddenly, the Demon Knight introduced himself with a menacing voice and said that he had been looking forward to seeing a strong man, after which he attacked the guy, because he was interested in what he was capable of. Thanks to such an unusual blade, the guy was able to resist such a strong opponent. Then he remembered that he had a parry ability that was already at level 3. Then he confirmed his theory that if you successfully parry the blows, you can ignore the difference in attack power and level. And although he had such an unusual blade and abilities, even with such skills it was difficult. After all, this was not enough, since this was his first meeting with such a majestic boss. He didn't understand why his attack didn't work. After all, he thought he could do it if the system didn't affect him, and then he began to think about how his defense could be broken through. The system noted that this was an excellent guess, because the master could ignore the correction of the WAP system. The guy was confused, because he thought that it could not be effective. The system suddenly went berserk and began telling the guy that he was stupid, and then asked him to think a little about the idea that had come to the master. Ryuki wondered if his blade could compete with metal armor. Then a thought struck him. He realized that he had made a mistake in thinking only about the strategic aspects of the game. When he was attacked by the Dark Knight's ghost once again, he realized that the labyrinth was a world created according to a game motif, and the system would have worked on an ordinary player but not on him, because he was different. While fighting, he still wondered what if these guesses were correct. Then he should have aimed at the hard-to-reach points, which were the weakest. Seeing that this guy was up to something, the Dark Knight began to attack even harder. The guy could only parry this powerful blow. Suddenly, due to the crossing of the blades, a spark was formed, which gave that very fuse to the additional feature of the guy's weapon, with which he attacked the ghostly Dark Knight, which was one of the strongest blows of this battle, who deprived the ghostly Dark Knight of his limbs. Having suffered, he could only sob proudly. The guy knew that in the labyrinth, health was the system. In other words, being a Yuguan player, the guy would not have said that it was it, because damage could be inflicted on the enemy himself. And if he aimed at vital points, then he could not only wound the ghostly knight, but also defeat him with one blow, if he had more strength. The system warned the guy that it was dangerous, after which something pierced him. He was not prepared for this, because the guy did not expect that the Dark Knight could have long-range attacks. Turning around, he noticed that an ominous energy was emanating from his limb, the same one that had pierced him. Here the Dark Knight said that demons were ferocious creatures that posed a threat to God, after which he wanted the guy to taste his despair. From his wound and from his limb began to come out dark matter, which surrounded the guy from all sides. Not knowing how to fight dark magic, the guy had to dodge it. It was then that the boy realized that this was a bad idea, because the Dark Knight was the boss of the second half of the game and was impossible to defeat during the training. Moreover, if you die in that place, it will be impossible to return. After all, even if the player's level increases, he still cannot return, which means he could not win. Moreover, no one has ever seen the second phase of the Dark Knight. At this time, he had too many attacks to parry. Suddenly, the system realized that its master was in danger. After all, the Black Knight pierced him with his dark matter. Ryuki screamed and slammed his palm on the table, unable to believe it. He was talking about how someone had rejected his strategic plan again, and he couldn't figure out what the problem was that time, since he was the Lindsay Guild's expert analyst. The director then looked at the strategy guide he had provided, but he knew that Rinfell had previously rejected it, to which the boy replied that it was much more effective than before, so he wanted it to be accepted. After throwing them the strategy guide provided, the boss told him that he wasn't even a player, but an ordinary ranked person, so he should come up with something better. Ryuki realized that the recapture did not suit his boss, and then he resigned himself to the fact that it was the will of their guild's ace. But he suddenly became angry because he was sure that the boss would not refuse Rinfell. And then he decided to vent his anger by slamming his fist on the table. After all, he couldn't understand how it could be that there would be no recapture, and then he realized that it was no longer worth listening to Rinfell and everything. The first thing he wanted to do was calm down, because he needed to earn money for his mother's operation, so he started correcting the management records, thinking that the guild would promote him for this. Suddenly, someone crept up behind him and whispered his name. This girl scared him, but she didn't mean to, because she just brought him coffee, because she thought that his tired appearance needed it. This girl's name was Cynthia. She was a researcher for the Lindsay Guild. The guy was very grateful to her for the care she showed. The girl noticed that he was editing the manual, which had been rejected several times. Cynthia thought that he was paying too much attention to it, which worried her, because she was worried about him. And she really wanted to help with this, but before that she asked if he was against it. Ryuki happily showed the last part of the strategic manual, but since it was very secret, she should inform her superiors about it and request the materials of the required part, which the girl was not against doing because she had a desire to help him. She was even glad because it was a good reason for communication. The guy asked his mother not to be surprised because she had finally been given a date for the operation. She was surprised because she didn't understand where the funds for this came from. Ryuki replied that she shouldn't worry about it because his strategic plan was accepted that time. His mother was very happy when she heard this. The guy said that it was all thanks to Cynthia, after which they hugged, and his mother told him that she was incredibly proud of him. Ryuki told her not to worry about anything anymore, as their efforts had been rewarded. The guy was previously told that he was being fired for the crime of disclosing top-secret guild information, which is why he was fired from Lindsay. The guy was surprised and didn't fully understand what they meant, but the authorities informed him that all the evidence had been collected, despite the fact that he had acted very cunningly, and if Cynthia hadn't reported it, no one would have noticed. When the guy heard her name, he was very surprised because this girl wanted to help him. Suddenly, one of the people expressed his dissatisfaction with this meeting because he did not understand why they were wasting their time on this. This was the same Rinfell Darius, who was the deputy guildmaster of Lindsay. He never thought that at this meeting he would have to meet Ryuk, who constantly published manuals that irritated him wildly. After all, Rinfell had always been curious about who this fool was, since he almost went crazy when he saw the last publication. Afterwards, Rinfell told Cynthia that it would be inappropriate for her to communicate with such a guy, and he also added that, as he had promised earlier, he would be his support, after which he invited the girl to celebrate this matter. Approaching Ryuk, Rinfell said that he didn't understand the essence of his job at all, but if he really was an analyst, then his analysis was terrible, and for this he should be fired. He also said that he knew that the guy was talking behind his back, and he was very surprised by his courage, because with her help he created an entire management, but Rinfell wondered if he had neglected his duties. That was all, and he told Ryuk that he was going to celebrate because his dismissal was a good reason. After all, he lost his title and became a no-name, for which Rinfell congratulated him. It was then that the user authentication began, where he received an unknown name under a regular number. It was believed that the suspect agreed with all the accusations, and for this he was deprived of the earned titles. In the battle with the Black Knight, the guy remembered all this because he had nothing left, no status, no name, and only the title of SRR level. The Black Knight was curious if this guy could withstand his attack. When he grabbed his dark matter, he wondered, where did he get his powers from? But he didn't care what kind of power it was because the guy didn't care. He wouldn't be able to prevent it. He was sure of it. Watching as the Black Knight attacked again, Ryuk had a question in his mind. Was this the end? And would his story really end like this? And when the dark matter approached the eye, he told himself that nothing had changed in his life because he still had to scoop it all out. Remembering his promise, he understood that everything couldn't happen just like that. And that very betrayal on Cynthia's part that he could not come to terms with. And even at that moment, he was attacked by the strongest Dark Knight. He resolutely said to himself such words as, he was going to rise to the top of everything from the very day, after which he jumped up and grabbed the Dark Knight's head, and he plunged his blade into this ghost, fleetingly recalling how Rinfell told Cynthia that she shouldn't communicate with him, which he really didn't like because what he did was extremely inappropriate. Therefore, having awakened the power within himself, Ryuki promised himself that this Rinfell would get what he deserved for what he had done. His defeats from his past life helped him cope with such a strong opponent, after which the battle reporting system surfaced, which reported that for the Dark Knight's urges, he received 15,000 EXP points, which were converted into RP, as well as a magic stone and knight armor, and an SR ticket Yuguan. Before disappearing, the ghost of the Dark Knight recognized the guy as a strong man who defeated the darkness, and for this he wished him to go only forward. The boy told the knight that even if he had simply kept silent, he still had no choice but to move on. He saluted such a strong opponent, after which he disappeared. At this time, the guy was already being watched from another place. One of the people became curious as to when this video of the fight was uploaded. Then he got the answer that they had this video a few hours ago, and there was also a counter question. Did he want to know who this person was? But he answered that there was no need for that, since he knew the identity of this guy. Instead, he told them to keep an eye on this guy, and then asked where Rinfell was. This man was Gabriel Darius, the master of the Lindsay Guild. People were surprised by the video that came out that same day, namely, that a no-name was able to defeat the Dark Knight, and they considered him a complete madman. It also shocked them, because no one had ever managed to do this before, and they didn't understand how an ordinary guy could defeat him. People even began to doubt that he was really a real knight, and it was easier for them to consider it some kind of bug. They were confused by the fact that in WAP, there was a parrying ability and a weapon in the form of a sword pistol. And although there were similarities, they were different, so they considered it nonsense. And yet, despite this, they accepted the fact that the Dark Knight was defeated. Then they wondered if the training area was badly damaged, and they thought that if it wasn't a mistake, then it could be explained. After all, it was just a toy, and the time initialization and other fake bugs should mostly be fixed. Watching the video again, they couldn't understand how this guy's reaction speed could be explained. Here, Ragnar, a second-level analyst for the Lindsay Guild, found information that this guy was previously known under the usual number 7017. She prided herself on being an analyst, but with her knowledge, the girl was unable to fully understand this video, namely, that only 2 hits were enough to defeat the boss. And no matter how you look at it, the word error in this form was unacceptable, and she thought that the best solution was for the guild boss to contact this player, but other analysts did not like this idea. Then the girl was outraged that the elder objected to this, but he explained that this player was certainly not bad, but he still believed that it was impossible, and there was simply an error on his account. Here to Rinfell, Darius still had analysts come to tell him about this player, but when he heard his name he couldn't understand who it was. Then people told him that this man was an analyst for their Lindsay Guild 3 years ago, and it was then that this guy created a very detailed strategic plan. After all, it was that same no-name who was fired from the guild at his request. Rinfell, in turn, said that there were a lot of such people, and based on this scant information, he could not remember him. Then the elder said that a video was uploaded where this guy defeated the Dark Knight of Chaos, and he saw it personally. Rinfell then said that it was just a mistake, since there was no problem in using bugs to defeat the Dark Knight. But the elder only repeated once again that he had banished the guy, and that meant... But then Rinfell interrupted him, saying that it didn't matter to him, and he also didn't understand since when the elder began to care about such trifles. After all, this guy was the most ordinary no-name. And he also added that such people were a waste of time. Listening to all this, the elder did not even know what to answer to this. Here his men were wondering what they would do. Then the elder said that there was a high probability that this guy was trying to lure them into a trap with such a demonstration, so they should act carefully. And he decided that for now, they just had to watch the situation. After all, it wasn't so urgent that they had to act in a hurry, because even if they were to collect information, they wouldn't lose anything. But when he left work, he was worried about his stupid brother, because he was a big spender. At this time, the system informed Ryuk that physical recovery had reached 87%, and at this point it suggested taking a break. But the guy only started complaining that he was in pain, and he thought he couldn't handle the Dark Knight. After all, he had serious injuries and wounds. The pain was the same as in reality, but he thought that he should get used to this, because he would constantly experience a similar feeling when fighting such strong ghosts. After some time, the guy set off on his journey, and now he could calmly say goodbye to the training area and move to a more serious place. He knew that this world was built around the main content, and the tower in front of him was of a demonic god. At this point, Ryuki understood that he would not get there, since he first had to conquer various dungeons to prove his abilities, which was the main goal. The system didn't understand why he would release the video so quickly. It was too dangerous, as it would attract enemies. Ryuki said he knew about all the risks, but he had his own plans for this. The guy was sure that people thought it was just a mistake, which was not uncommon in games to talk about the UR rank as a mistake, and even if they acted, the leader would start by gathering information, and the guy suspected that the guild leader would suspect that this was a trap. After all, unlike Rinfil, he was a cautious person. The system was curious when he released the video. Was he trying to confuse them? Then the guy said that was exactly his plan, because the more attention he got, the more limited their options. In addition, he believed that if the transformations that the system told him about were true, then it was possible to hide a physical body in the labyrinth and use the capabilities of UR. After all, he found a way to crush Rinfil, Darius, and all he had left to do was lure him into the labyrinth. After all, if he notices him, he will definitely want to come for him. It was only necessary to provoke him a little, and at that moment when Rinfil appeared, this will be a big chance for Ryuk to deal with him. The system offered the guy to play gacha so that they wouldn't get bored on the way, and Ryuk had also accumulated a sufficient number of tickets. There were 20 Yuguan tickets in total, 2 tickets for SR rank, and 15,000 RP points. The guy informed the system that upon arrival at the village, he would need to leave the labyrinth every 10 days for safety reasons. After all, the avatar, the master's body, was a different technology, since the physical player remained in reality and there was danger for him, and conversion was a method of transferring the body itself, so there was no need for such low-level concerns. Then the guy realized that his body was real and not an avatar as he had thought before. In any case, the system informed him that since it was obliged to perform the conversion in an emergency situation, it was recommended that he return to reality, which of course the guy thought about. But since the recommendation was from the system, he accepted it and moved into reality. He returned to where he had been last time, namely the random box store. That's when the system jokingly suggested that he spin the random boxes again. Ryuki found it strange that he didn't feel any pain after what happened to him last time in the world, but the system reported that all of this was the privileges of the UR rank. Afterwards, she told him that there were a couple of hidden cameras installed in the store that few people knew about, and she suggested that he block them, but the guy only thought about it. At that moment, the door opened, and people came out who were glad to meet this stranger again. It was the same boss of this establishment who was surprised that after what had happened, the guy still looked good. He wondered where he had been hiding from them all day. Ryuki wasn't very happy when he saw these bad guys because his last encounter with them almost cost him his life. The boss said that thanks to the cameras, he was able to get there quickly because he was still interested in the fact that the guy had knocked something valuable out of a random box. But before they could finish speaking, the people told their boss that the guy had decided to run away. The system wanted to know why the master was running away, and Ryuki said it was obvious, since he would hardly have been able to deal with 10 bandits. The system then suggested that he plot a route to avoid the bad outcome. She said that at the next corner he should have turned right, and then he should have walked 100 meters and turned left. The guy wondered, should he have trusted the system? Suddenly, while running away along a safe route, Ryuki was shocked, because he came to a dead end with very high walls topped with barbed wire. Ryuki was angry and wanted to teach the system a lesson for doing this to him, but it started running away from him, saying that there was a good reason for it. At this point, they were overtaken by bandits who were curious whether this guy had finished his marathon. The gang boss said that after so much effort, he managed to disappear yesterday, and he was interested in how he managed to do it. Realizing that the bandits had cornered him, the guy didn't know what to do in this situation, but they told him that they wanted to take what he had managed to knock out of their machine guns in a friendly manner. Yuguan from the beginning. Then the system told him that there was a wooden sword on the left side. Ryuki was surprised and didn't understand what she was talking about. The system said that unfortunately he didn't have any special items that he could summon into reality. But despite this, she brought him to that place specifically because there was a weapon there, and she wanted him to take this wooden sword. Ryuki was outraged because he didn't understand where this weapon belonged and what he was supposed to do with this stick. Suddenly, a magical glow began to emanate from the wooden blade, which the guy certainly didn't expect. Seeing that the stranger was going to fight with this bandit, it became funny. A big guy came out in front of them, who told his boss that he himself could handle this guy. While attacking, he asked the no-name not to be angry because he was only with him. And when the guy threw his stick like a boomerang, which flew off to the side, the big guy began to laugh. Suddenly, she came back and dealt a serious blow, after which he fell to the ground, and everyone else was surprised that this guy managed to deal with this jock. The gang boss didn't want to waste any more time, so he ordered his men to take what he needed. Ryuk only found this funny, knowing that he could use his skills from the labyrinth, namely, mastery of a 3rd-level SR sword and parrying with the same strength. He realized that no matter how lucky he was, the chance to use the skills in reality was a big cheat. The bandits didn't understand what had happened and how the guy had become so strong. After all, he was an ordinary no-name. They were already starting to dislike this mission, which made their boss more and more angry. And then he raised his voice at them and told them not to let themselves be deceived. It didn't matter to him that this guy was so strong. He thought they could take him with numbers, so he ordered his men to kill him. He considered this guy to be too daring. He assumed that the guy became so strong because of yesterday's things. Well, since they were black mambas, they thought that a no-name couldn't compare with the ruler of this territory. Suddenly he heard the cries of his people, which led to confusion. He heard only cries for help that were terrible. Meanwhile, Ryuki was already dealing with the last bandit. With such strength, the guy felt great, because before in the real world he was an ordinary weakling, but now he had delusions of grandeur. He was helped in this by his SR-level ball mastery ability, which gave him a boost to his ball mastery and improved his abilities when using a one-handed ball. When the guy took this stick, he felt a surge of strength and skills that he used in the labyrinth, and this conversion was completely different from ordinary players. After all, he managed to transform his body, not the avatar, and if he became stronger in the labyrinth, then this would be reflected in reality. The boss told the guy that everyone he left behind had one thing in common. Because he took away his right to create an account yesterday, he would not forgive him for it. So he told his men to attack him again and take back what should rightfully be his. Well, this time this attack was not crowned with victory, since everyone who decided to attack the guys got what they deserved. After which the guy said that the next one would be the boss who helped him a lot yesterday, while the boss himself was trying to reach for his weapon to attack the guy. The boss started waving him in different directions. He was restless and already asked the guy not to come near him, just let him leave him alone. In turn, the tricks were easily reflected by his weapon, which he certainly did not expect. He was able to achieve this effect using his level 3 SR parry ability. The guy didn't understand what this boss was saying because his subordinates were attacked, and he believed that as a boss, he had to take revenge for them. Well, he asked the guy to leave him alone, after which he suddenly reached for his weapon. The guy didn't think that the boss would decide to surrender so quickly. He assumed that he would decide to take his weapon, so he blocked his hand in advance so that he couldn't do anything. The boss didn't like that this kid was devaluing his ability like that, because he was a black mamba. As soon as he attacked him, the guy immediately repelled his attack. Ryuki said it was funny how you felt a surge of power, and he was curious if the boss felt the same way when he did that to him yesterday. After defeating them, he felt relieved, because before the guy was in the same place. That day, the right to create an account that they took away was his only hope that came to him when he had nothing but despair, so he promised that he would take away his hope just like they did to him. The boss told the guy that if he continued to fool around like that, he would have problems. Well, it didn't matter at all because all he needed was for the boss to shut up. At that moment, he started to shed a tear and asked the guy to sit with him. Well, as if it weren't so, Ryuki decided to repay him in the same way he did. And so, having come home, the system was curious why the master did not get rid of these people, because it was dangerous and they could not take revenge on him. Then the couple said that it was very easy for him to deal with them, but he did not want to stoop to their level, so he simply suppressed them with his power. And now, for some time, they will not bother him. Then the system realized that fear and cruelty were human weaknesses. Ryuki asked the system if it did something about those bandits. The system confirmed this and reported that it had interfered with their internal seed device and manipulated the visual part of their boss. Ryuki was surprised that the system was capable of such a thing. Then she said that this operation only worked when the person was mentally ill, and she believed that the boss saw her master as a terrible monster that he could not defeat. Now he felt fear, and she was sure that he would not want to go against him. However, Ryuki believed that he should have completely hidden the existence of the system, because if the whole world found out, it would turn upside down. Here the guy decided to take out his sharp folding device. He was pleasantly surprised because even with it, he could use his fencing skills and the skills associated with it were learned intuitively, which was pretty good, since weapons with a long range were inconvenient to carry. He decided to inquire about Yuguan, and then the system told him that the master originally lived outside of Yggdrasil, and despite the fact that at this present time he had no side effects. For example, accelerated aging due to the influence of the time of the labyrinth. Having heard this, the guy said that he had assumed this earlier. Then the system said that if this flaw had been present, then such a rank could not have been called UR. After some time, Ryuki met with the leader of the bandits to take action. The guy assumed that modern technology helped him recover in just a few hours, which the leader confirmed. He was surprised that this no-name called him despite what he had to go through. The guy assumed that he paid for his treatment from the money he received for the right to create his account. Hearing this, the leader got scared and said that if it was about that amount, then he asked to give him time to reimburse everything. He hoped that the guy would be less lenient towards him this time. Ryuki said that he was still alive only because of his whim, and asked not to forget about it. And when the leader said that he understood everything, then Ryuki told him that help was needed, to which he replied that he was ready to do anything. After which they both went to the red light district, which was not particularly famous for its luxury, as there were many beggars. The gang leader knew this guy named Goro, who was just begging, and he had to chase him away so he wouldn't bother them. Arriving at a place called Yorozuya Tenko, Ryuki asked if they had come to the right place, to which the leader replied that they had come to the right place, since everyone had been using this place for illegal transactions. Then the guy decided to make sure and ask if he sold the right to create his account here, but in response, the leader of the bantha only bowed his head and muttered something. There was a man inside who ran all the operations and was happy to bring new customers to his place. Ryuki was surprised that he seemed to be a young guy, but his voice was like that of an old man, and he asked if he was the owner of this shop, which the guy confirmed and introduced himself as Ju Tenko, the owner of this Yorozuya, who was wondering what this stranger was looking for in such a place. The system told Ryuk that this owner's body was inhuman, and it was trying to capture basic information about this player. Then the boy understood why his voice was so strange, but he thought that facial expressions with the whole body were forbidden. Then Ju Tenko said that it was quite an expensive model, but he still managed to buy it. However, he found it funny that the guy was talking about the law with a black market trader. Since Ryuki hadn't answered his question about why would they send me there before, he said he wanted to know what happened to his right to create an account. Ju Tenko didn't understand why this guy needed such information. At that moment, listening to the entire dialogue, the leader of the gang was frightened and began to grind his teeth. Ju Tenko understood everything and said that the right to create an account was an extremely unique offer due to its rarity, but he said that unfortunately he sold it a long time ago. He wanted to know if the guy was interested in something else, and then, upset about the account being sold, Ryuk said that there was something else. The guy said that he came to him to trade with a product that needed to be sold. Then, Ju Tenko said that he was willing to look at his offer because he was engaged in various sales. He couldn't wait to look at his goods in the bag. As if by chance, the smiling face suddenly changed to a surprised look, all because he could not believe it. What he saw in front of him was a bag full of magic stones. Ju Tenko didn't understand. Didn't the guy know their true value that he decided to bring them to him? Ryuki asked not to mock him just because he was a no-name, because it was an elementary thing, and he knew their value. Artifacts from the labyrinth were divided into two types. The first were those that could not be used in the real world, and the second were objects that materialized in this world. Magic stones were a special artifact from which ether was extracted, and the higher their rank, the more pure ether could be extracted. Thanks to this, the social status of the players also increased. Ju Tenko said that was why he had trouble understanding the guy, because the best solution was to sell the stones legally rather than through a black market dealer, to which the guy replied that he did not want to sell them publicly, because he had obtained them himself. Ju Tenko thought it was stupid that a no-name managed to obtain magic stones. Looking at them, he said that it was time for Luca to go home, which surprised him, and did not understand why he was being driven away. He began to be indignant about this, since he did not want to leave at the most interesting place. But Ryuki wasn't going to miss out on the opportunity to sell the stones because of him, so he insisted that he leave the counter. But since Luca didn't understand him right away, the guy had to kick him out. Ju Tenko admitted that at first he thought he was just an ordinary guy who had the luck to steal the magic stones, but he asked for forgiveness. After all, being a no-name was normal, but recently something deviated from this norm. Ryuki didn't understand what this merchant meant. He said that he didn't think that the famous hero from the video would show up at his stall, which was unexpected. After all, he did the impossible by defeating the Dark Knight. So Ju Tenko was happy to welcome the guy whose name was number 7017. And he said that if he was trying to hide his identity, then he should have been more careful, and also about this magic stone. It was called World Fanaticism, a gem dropped by the Dark Knight of Chaos. That's what it showed when evaluating it. And Ryuk was the only one who defeated this boss in the tutorial area due to a mistake. Therefore, calling him by name, he wanted to ask again what was the purpose of his visit to this store. The boy admitted that his name was Ryuk, 7017, and he appreciated his advice, but he had come to shop, so he just wanted to get down to business. Ju Tenko asked what he wanted from the black market merchant. Then Ryuk said without thinking that he wanted a emod, and he was wondering if there was one available. Then Ju Tenko got nervous and started to whisper. He was shocked that this guy was talking about such a thing, and he was curious if he even knew what it was. But Ryuk knew that it made the maze less difficult, but it had side effects. The merchant said that most of the mods were cancelled due to lack of functionality and major flaws. Ryuki was sure that this merchant had a couple of these hidden away, which is why he approached him. The merchant was surprised that even the no-name knew that it was a chip that artificially changed the components of the labyrinth, but he had to ask if he had seen a dead man near his shop. Ryuk didn't understand what he was getting at when he talked about that beggar. Then he told the guy that the man was a MOD user. He had previously said that he wanted to experiment with sensory control, so he bought the analgesia emod, and although it was weak, it did increase his pain threshold. The result was catastrophic, although the pain was dulled, but the other feelings became very acute, which was his undoing. He even tried to remove all the installed mods, but unfortunately, it was too late, since it is impossible to return the feelings back. In fact, there were many more side effects, so the authorities banned its development and got rid of the rest completely. There were a few mods that were tested for safety, but they were publicly available. And beyond the mods, the merchant still had a long way to go with some people. Suddenly, looking through his lens, Ju Tenko wondered about that. That the guy defeated the Dark Knight of Chaos single-handedly? Which the guy confirmed and reported that on the internet he was nicknamed a cheetah for this. And whether it was a genius with cheating skills or a simple fool exploiting mistakes, Ryuku didn't care. Because he was not against any means or methods. He believed that it was better for him to use them than to remain in one place without progression. The merchant was curious if the guy knew how to work with mods, but he only asked in response if he was interested in what would happen next. It was a very good offer, which made the merchant think, and he said that even though most of the mods were removed, he was lucky enough to keep a couple. But first he wanted to make sure the guy actually knew how to use them, so he gave him a couple of others. Ryuki was sure that they were very dangerous, but he had Yuguan, and the guy believed that it would protect him, and the mod he held in his hand increased the attack power 3 times. The system said it was terrible because it was just a simple doubling of the number and would have no effect. Then the guy chose the next one, which could predict the future 1 second ahead, and the idea was good, but Ryuk knew that it could not be implemented. He believed that it could be a hindrance on the battlefield. The next mod was one that turned everyone into beautiful. The system assumed that it worked on the principle of hallucinations deceiving the eyes. Then the guy took a mod to increase all abilities for 1 and 2 seconds. But he didn't like it because it put too much strain on his brain and body. Then he took the next one with a sensitivity increase of 3,000 times. But he didn't like that one either, as well as the others, which were useless, which upset him. But the next mod was the probability manipulation mod, which he liked because it put less strain on the body than the others. Ryuki believed that the person who created it was a genius. After all, the mod allowed you to influence events that could actually happen in the player's favor, and with its help, the probability of all Yggdrasil outcomes would be 0.305% better. The system liked this too, because the master would not be affected by the decrease in productivity due to the avatar, so the probability could be as low as 1%. The guy knew it would be hard to feel such a low percentage advantage, but those small numbers could be added to the random box. He decided and told the merchant that he would take 3 mods, which did not please the system, as it found it hard to believe that his choice was to increase the rate of the random box. The merchant, in turn, was happy, because the guy managed to choose only normal mods from a pile of trash. But these words about it being trash made the guy think. The merchant asked Ryuk to wait, because he misunderstood him, because he did not want to deceive him. After all, he offered the customers who requested the mods to take a test. Then Ryuk wondered if he knew the creator of the mods. After some thought, the merchant said he would give a discount as an apology, and he could use these things that had been erased before they appeared on the scene. Afterwards, the user was authenticated, and the system offered the guy to install the mod, warning that the installation was only possible once without possible cancellation, to which he agreed. The merchant wanted to ask one last question. He was interested in whether, if he could really master MOD, then, what did he plan to do with such power? But Ryuki just smiled, after which there was silence. The merchant fell to the floor because the guy evaporated with such speed that he was knocked over. But Ju Tenko only laughed at this evasion of the question. Suddenly Ryuki appeared and said only something about the top of the world, which included both bronze and silver. So is gold and platinum, called Rinful. And he said that it didn't matter if it was the diamond that was also called the king, but Ryuki planned to crush everyone who stood at the top. This idea sounded quite interesting, which amused the merchant, and he said that the no-name could come to him at any time of the day, after which Ryuki set out on a journey to conquer this world. The system was surprised because it thought that he would have problems because he was a no-name, but surprisingly, everything went smoothly. The guy was even in the labyrinth, but no one would have thought that he was an ordinary no-name, especially in this village. Although it was quite lively there, and it was strange that no one noticed him. There were nice people there, lots of vendors, in general a very ordinary village, or maybe there was something mysterious hidden there. Ryuki thought that this scene looked like something from the Middle Ages, because it was so peaceful. The system was curious when the master would finally start spinning random boxes. After all, he had accumulated a lot of points. Ryuki was tired of this gambling, and he asked to be patient for a little while, since it could be done at any moment. Suddenly, the guy noticed something strange. Namely, the glances from ordinary workers who had just done this fell on him. The system also noticed this and became interested in whether the master had done something that was causing him to be watched so closely. The guy said that regular NPCs hated people because stupid players thought they were unrealistic and called them insects. They had committed many atrocities, so it was no wonder that the locals looked at him that way. Suddenly, the guy caught a picture of someone catching a local thief. It was a merchant who was angry that this guy had the audacity to steal his goods, but he in turn asked for forgiveness and said that he did it only because he was hungry. But he wasn't going to just let the guy go. And watching all this, Ryuki realized that this village wasn't as quiet as it seemed at first glance. But he thought that the clothes of this NPC thief were not like the others in this village. The system revealed that he was a resident of the labyrinth called Space Alien. Yggdrasil finished this game 3 months ago. Then the guy realized that the game had completely disappeared. So people traveled to other labyrinths to survive, because they had no other choice. He thought he was imagining things, but this place was really noisy, and all because some people couldn't adapt to another world. The system told that unnecessary labyrinths were destroyed by Yggdrasil and WAP, and the same could be expected. Then the guy realized that they should have acted even faster. He knew that even if the game ended, he would still be able to destroy Rinful and Lindsay before that moment. After some time, Ryuk managed to find a place to spend the night, and then the system again asked if they could spin the gacha. But the guy said that the first thing they should have done was check the MOD, and then the system checked and reported that the merchant had not lied because the probability of random boxes had increased. The percentage of N rank decreased, while that of the rest became higher. From a low 0.3%, the chance increased to 1%, and although the difference was not great, the guy was happy with such indicators. Since Yuguan had been waiting for this for a long time, Ryuki offered him to spin gacha. The system screamed that there were 40 regular tickets and only 2 SR tickets, and there were 15,000 RP points. And with that amount, there was a high chance of getting an SSR item. The guy wanted to start with 40 regular tickets first. But what was his surprise after opening all the boxes? After all, from such a heap, only rubbish fell out for him, which was probably why he was in no hurry to open them. He spent 40 tickets and got no SRE, and the probability manipulation mod was complete crap. The system decided to joke and said that with this level of garbage he could sell toothbrushes. But Ryuki didn't appreciate this and told this vacuum cleaner that it would be better to give him a good object and not to joke so stupidly. But he in turn asked him to stop because it was done for him. Suddenly the guy saw 2 rare items drop. His face changed dramatically because it seemed like those were SSR items. Now he believed in probability manipulation mods, but the system considered him a dirty swindler because it was not good to use cheats. The guy got a new SR level skill called Sprint, as well as an SSR level intuition skill. The guy knew that with Sprint he could move quickly, but he didn't fully understand what the intuition skill did. After all, it strengthened the sixth sense, and when reaching the limit, it allowed him to look into the root of the world. This is exactly what the equipment for this skill looked like. Ryuki didn't feel any changes at all, other than the knowledge that this skill was the same rank as the first SSR. He wondered if he should have leveled up. After all, there were 7,000 RP points left until the next level of intuition progression, which surprised him because it was too much, because for other skills, upgrading to level 3 only cost 2,100 RP points. The system also thought that it was stupid to spend points on unknown skills, and the best solution was to use the chance to get another SR level item. The guy still began to think that it would be better to spend 100 gachas on increasing the skill, but the system tried to dissuade him because RP was a rather valuable resource that was better spent on boxes. But the guy made a decision and raised all his skills 1 level higher at once. Now swordplay was at the 4th level of mastery and 1 attack boost was added. Parry has also been increased to level 4, and temporary effect enhancements have been increased. The new sprint skill had improved to level 2, and now the instantaneous movement at high speed was 14 meters, and its recovery time was about 16 seconds. The guy still had 8,730 RP points left, and he was thinking about whether he could raise his sword skill to the limit of the Yuguan system, or distribute the rest among the other indicators. But then the system kept reminding him that there was still a chance to open the box, and it suggested spending the rest of the RP on it. But he wasn't interested in that, so Ryuki raised his sword skill to level 5, which greatly disappointed the system. And this impudent vacuum cleaner just boiled with anger and fell on the bed emitting smoke, while the guy was happy with his decision. After which the system reported that the maximum level of sword mastery had been reached, and that the peak for increasing the new rank had been reached, which Ryuki was glad about, because he was not at all against raising his rank. Suddenly, a bright light appeared in front of the guy, which surprised him, since he was not doing anything. In front of him was a nugget from which a golden glow emanated. Ryuki asked the system to explain to him what was happening. But this stupid vacuum cleaner overheated so much that it lay switched off. Ryuk could only guess what it was. Suddenly, the system reported that upon reaching the maximum level, a reward is given, a Yuguan X ticket and a Yuguan X ticket. And also the sword mastery was strengthened to SR plus Yggdrasil influence level I. And the skills when wearing the sword were strengthened, and also when using it, it was possible to activate the first level Aura Blade. The guy was happy because he couldn't even imagine Yuguan's strength. After all, many players couldn't even master normal swordsmanship, but this skill was many times stronger than that. That's why Ryuk felt such a power that he had never dreamed of before. And the system at the same time did not understand why it chose this person as its master. After all, it just wanted to see the joy of the various boxes falling out. The guy told Yuguan to stop whining because they had a new business. The system wanted to know where the master was going. Ryuki replied that he was going to the dungeon, since Rinfell had won first place in it, and he wanted to take his title for himself. Since it was the master's first time there, the system was worried whether everything would be okay. Ryuki replied that he knew the dungeon he conquered well, so he was confident that he would not lose to him. At this time, a group of players were already standing at its entrance, ready to conquer the unknown darkness that the dungeon hid. The commander-in-chief told everyone to remain vigilant and be ready to strike down anyone. Among them was Ryuk, who did not want to listen to the commander-in-chief and planned to handle everything on his own, which surprised everyone. Then the commander-in-chief asked the boy to wait a minute, as he did not quite understand why he was going alone. After all, it was a dangerous dungeon, and it was not the best decision to go without a group. But Ryuki only coldly said that he knew about it, after which he began to enter through the portal inside. The group was surprised. They didn't understand what was wrong with this guy. They saw him for the first time and thought that he was a suicide bomber, since he was going to do something like that. Suddenly, the commander-in-chief turned around after his comrades said that strange things were happening in this dungeon because no one had been able to conquer it for 3 months, and then he was horrified that this guy went there alone. At that time, Ryuk was beginning his journey to the witch's hideout dungeon. The guy set himself the task of beating Rinfell's record. So he drew his blade, which glowed with flame for the first time, and this was the very same first-level aura. And then the guy got ready, because it was time to attack the unknown. But he couldn't even imagine that he had already been watched from the very beginning. Threw a magic ball, and whoever did it loved to catch such self-confident intruders. After all, they desecrated her sacred place, for which they had to pay, because this territory was not for them at all. And this terrifying witch was going to deal with him with her own hands, and she wanted to bring it as a sacrifice. This was, by the way, her refuge, where she was the boss. And for the fact that the guy entered it for the first time, he received a reward for the achievement in the form of 1 Yuguan ticket. It was hard for Ryuk to navigate there, because it was dark and nothing could be seen. But the guy understood that in any case, the structure of the dungeon was constantly changing randomly, and the only way to understand its real architecture was to see it with your own eyes. He was curious to check with the system about Rinfell's record. He recalled that it was something like 17 hours and 30 minutes. Then the system showed the guy the rating of being in this dungeon, and he was surprised that the second place after Rinfell was 17 hours and 38 minutes, and the third place was 19 hours and 5 minutes. And then Ryuk was shocked, because that was a big difference in time. Since there was a player who was so close to Rinfell, Ryuk was going to remember Arcia from that guild. After wandering around the dungeon for a short while, the guy came to a place that was teeming with bats. He knew that these creatures attacked in groups in caves where it was difficult to maintain visibility and distance, and if even one bit, you could get a debuff, which was a problem. But luckily, Ryuk had a simple solution to this problem. Even the system was unaware of the device the guy used against those bats. Covering his ears, the guy said it was a sound device, after which a strong sound wave occurred. Even the system could not withstand such an impulse. Ryuk said the bats were sensitive to noise. The system asked the guy to warn him about this next time because she thought her eardrums would burst. But the guy was confused that the robot thought he had eardrums. He began to kill the bats one by one, those that were not affected by the sound effect. The system wondered, wasn't it too slow for someone who was going to break the record? Then the guy answered that in any case, conquering the dungeon was a long undertaking. At that moment, the guy was worried about something else, because no one had been able to conquer this dungeon for the last 3 months. The system became interested in why this was happening. Then the guy said that the place was famous for its low level of difficulty. After Rinfell cleared it, they began to treat it as a training one, but informally no one went through it for 3 months. And yet the system noticed that the guy stood in one place for a long time and it thought that he was lost. But Ryuk denied it and said that the patterns were important in this place. But the system noticed that all this time they were circling around the same place, and it seemed to her that they were lost. To dispel her doubts, the guy asked her opinion on how many manuals he could have written when he was in the company. He said that this dungeon was also in the simulation, and he saw it more than 1,000 times. But the system saw that from that moment on, they were just going around in circles, and she said that if the master really got lost, he could turn to her for help. But while she was doubting him, the guy found another entrance. He also noticed that on the third stalagmite, there was a curved scratch, while previously there were only straight ones. All because the changes occurred when you passed this place for the 32nd time, which meant that the path to retreat was clear. The system then assumed that this was how the master remembered the road, but Ryuki only said that it was too noisy and stupid. The guy said that this magical dungeon was created to make players get lost, so the structure of the cave changed in real time. It was necessary to find the right path using professional skills, so Rinfell included his squad of allies who possessed them. But before he could find such skills, Ryuk had to memorize the paths on the map to conquer it, and by his calculations they should be at the next point in 5 minutes. The system was surprised that the guy could remember all the subtleties, because this method was not even possible for ordinary players to imagine, and it assumed that this method was intended for single-player mode. and she thought that her master was crazy, but then the guy said that he heard everything that this robot vacuum cleaner said. Ryuki reported that they would soon find themselves in the labyrinth, with only 30 minutes left, which took longer than he could have imagined. And he wondered if there were issues that needed to be addressed, and what was the reason for the players' failures over the past 3 months. At this time, the dungeon boss noticed that this clumsy yet agile invader had managed to enter the labyrinth, but she thought that he was lucky last time, because she planned to send him into the abyss of despair. After all, very soon at the exit of the labyrinth, there was her death magic, which was located on the floor. And she wanted this guy to be the first one to experience her. As soon as Ryuk entered it, the magic immediately began to work, which he certainly did not expect. The system wanted to know what was going on, but the guy replied that he didn't know. But he understood one thing: there was danger ahead. Then he had an idea and took out a spare doll, hoping that it might work. After he threw it, the magical effect took effect, and he could watch from the country how it worked. After Ryuk saw the black flames, he realized that it was instant death magic. He was confused because he thought that such traps should appear in the tower in the second half, but he didn't understand why they were there. The system said that it was unknown to it, but the characteristics of the dungeon had changed, and it recommended the master to leave. The guy didn't expect that such cruel traps awaited him from the very beginning. Looking at the other moves, he only thought about whether there really was no way out. It suddenly dawned on him that the right path must be a dead end, but it seemed to him that everything was fine with this road, besides the fact that it had instant death magic on it. But Ryuk still assumed that it could be all because of his new skill, SSR Intuition, which was instantly activated upon equipping. Watching the guy, the boss considered him a lucky guy who managed to save his life on a thin line. But she believed that it was only a matter of time, because no matter where he went, he could not escape her death magic. And she thought the guy would be scared for the rest of his life. Suddenly, she was surprised because he disappeared from her field of vision, which rarely happened to anyone. But to her joy, she easily found it on her magic ball. But she couldn't stop being surprised because the guy had already reached the central hall by that time, and she couldn't understand how he managed to do it, and yet she suddenly became uninterested because she believed that he could not survive in this cave because she had put so much effort into setting traps everywhere there. Suddenly, the guy disappeared from her sight again, which left her completely stunned. At this point, the boss lady started to get angry that this guy was able to do such a thing. She found the guy this time in the old laboratory, but earlier it seemed to her that he was on the opposite side from the central hall. This place had multiple spells, and although she had no idea what the guy was doing, she was sure that he was finished. But suddenly the old woman was completely stunned. She considered it impossible that the guy could so skillfully avoid her traps and then disappear again. She strained hard to figure out where he was this time, and in order not to panic, she decided to activate all the traps at once. It was hard, but Grandma thought that this little rascal had turned into another insect. Suddenly, there was an explosion coming from behind her, and then a voice began to say something about how it was a shame for him to damage such precious material. And then he decided to ask if this was the boss's room, while the sinister granny could not describe the emotions she was experiencing at that moment. The system thought it was all a hoax and a terrible exercise in skill. The guy didn't understand. Did the vacuum cleaner want to watch him die? When the boss saw this guy, she asked how he managed to get there. But Ryuk said that it was too much trouble for him to explain everything because all he wanted was to deal with her quickly. He decided to name her the boss of the dungeon witch's hideout, but then changed his mind and named her the Lone Witch Cereal. But holding his blade behind him, he still felt that these names did not suit her. Pointing his sword at her, he told her point blank that she needed to come up with something less scary. Having gained her full form, the dungeon boss told the boy that he had started this in vain. The dungeon boss wanted to know how this guy managed to get past all her traps. At this time, Ryuk was content with the fact that this old woman really believed that she could defeat him, because the entire path was mined. The system noticed that the master at that moment looked more like a villain than a decent player. The guy understood that he was still far from the exit, and there was a common bug right in front of his nose, and there was a high probability that he would die if he stepped on such a trap, and he began to think about waiting out this bug. But Ryuk knew he couldn't do that if he wanted to take a position before Lindsay Rinfel's guild began to act. Suddenly, the system scanned the area and discovered many deadly traps, and since it was extremely difficult to find out their exact location, it began to worry about the master because if he stumbled even once, then... But despite the system's concerns, the guy immediately rushed forward no matter what. After the system saw whole balls of magical smoke from the activated traps, it began to ask its master if everything was okay with him. Then he heard the guy's voice telling him that he would be surprised, but he was fine. Then the system was surprised because it had never seen its master in such a fearless mood. After all, it thought that he was upset after the last gotcha. But the guy was tired of hearing about this gotcha, so he said that he didn't care. This answer surprised the system, and it wondered what the master was talking about. And Ryuki replied that last time he hit the jackpot by drinking a valuable item. The boss granny realized that the deception did not work on the guy's intuition because she calculated the gaps in space and the bugs created. Ruki told the boss that this was only a small percentage of his potential, because in the future he was going to improve his intuition, but for now, it was only at the initial level. The system noted that this was, of course, an amazing skill, but it was just a human feeling. The guy believed that the system was right, but at that moment his main task was to survive in this place. The lone witch Serial was not happy that an intruder had entered her lair. She immediately began to throw out many deadly traps everywhere, casting her spells. This began to fascinate the guy and he became under her influence. But he came to his senses in time and managed to dodge. If he hadn't managed to do this, he would have been in the place of the shadow. Ruki understood that it was useless to drag out the fight because the witch's attacks were the same type. Using his sprint skill, he got closer to her, but she started shouting that it was a mistake. SR, rank sword skill. Ruki admitted that she was a strong opponent, but he planned to finish her off as soon as possible. Suddenly, the old woman started saying something about how she was free and that she no longer had to follow any instructions. And while she was going crazy, the guy did not miss the opportunity to attack her. He already thought that one blow was enough and that victory was his. Suddenly, some unknown force emanating from the lone witch Serial pushed him back. Having landed, he did not understand what it could be. At this moment, the witch's head returned to its original body position. And then the system informed the master that this boss could constantly regenerate, and apparently it was the main bug of this dungeon, which did not please the guy at all. He understood that normal attacks wouldn't work against her strength. So, in order to avoid getting caught, he had to dodge. Because he didn't want to neglect his intuition, because one mistake could lead to his immediate death. Suddenly, while he was thinking, he didn't notice the clot of energy that was heading towards him. As he began to run away, the boy decided to ask Yu Guan if there was another way to deal with this. Then the system reported that it had some assumptions about this, so it changed the characteristics of the evaluation mode in advance. And now, the boy could identify monsters by worshipping the great UR system. And when the boy heard this, he turned on the monster evaluation mode. After that, he learned that the lone witch Serial was from the Phantasm world, had an infinite regeneration skill, was level 25, had a bugged death trap ability, and possessed death magic that was also bugged. When Ryuk saw that wings had now appeared, he was extremely surprised that the old woman had even started to fly. But he still continued to chase after her, bypassing all the traps in order to defeat the boss once and for all. At that moment, the guy also activated the pen of the Lonely Witch, which said that she was an alien, in the category Other, by the name of the bug. Ryuk didn't expect it, because the guy thought that the world where this individual came from was destroyed 3 months ago. But it dawned on his friend that this was the very reason for the bug that was giving out information that she was an alien. When the witch began to make her attacks, everything around the dungeon was shining with bright colors. At that time, the Yuguang system told its master not to worry, because she was nearby. She also asked not to touch the traps, because even touching it with a little finger could lead to his death. But looking at how the guy ignored her, it was scary. She was excited and wondered if the master had gone mad, but all she heard in response was that he was going to climb to the top and that this flame would not stop him. But the witch Serial had a different opinion on this matter, so she accumulated a huge amount of dark energy. Looking at this, the guy understood that in order to survive, he simply shouldn't touch it, so he was just going to turn away from the attack. The grandmother was confident that she would be able to deal with the unwanted guest, since this time she blocked all escape routes. Suddenly, a blade flashed behind her, and Ryuk's voice spoke, saying that she was the same as this dungeon. He managed to fool her and appear behind her, and he told her that borrowed power always became unreasonable at some point, and no matter how much it covered the entire territory, the weak points would still be displayed. All he had to do was attack her wings, because they were the very cause of the malfunction. But the old woman asked him to wait with this, because they had given her freedom. And the guy, of course, did not quite understand what she meant. And then she said that she had been in this dungeon for a long time and had fulfilled her role, and that she had never had any doubts or feelings. And having received these wings, Serial was freed from the curse. The guy realized that the witch wanted to free herself from her role. It was very similar to him, which surprised her greatly, and she didn't understand what he was talking about. Then Ryuk told her that he too was trying his best to escape from this world that looked like a dump. Then Serial assumed that if they were similar, then he could understand her feelings. Smiling, the old woman said that if he cooperates with her, then... And while the witch was saying something about cooperation, the guy realized that if he destroyed her freedom, he would gain incredible glory. After some thought, he still deprived Serial of her wings. He managed to do this by activating the SSR skill. After that, Ryuk saw her stats, such as Serial's magic stone, %, her heart, %, her attire, %, old wooden staff, %, amulet of glory, %, mandrake, %. Then she said that he was a simple intruder into her sanctuary, and since the bug disappeared and the boss returned to his original state, she ordered him to fall at her feet for what he had done. Without thinking twice, the guy pierced her with his blade. After all, nothing has changed since her return. All she had to do was lose, and he would get a little closer to his glory. After which the system rewarded him for clearing the dungeon and gave him a Yuguan ticket X, and since the Lonely Witch's hideout was cleared, he received a reward in the form of a Yuguan ticket X and also Yuguan X tickets, and for first place, a Yuguan ticket SRX. Battle report, victory, received, Exp and RP Serial's magic stone, and her heart. Ryuk seemed disappointed that there was such a small reward for such a boss. Although the granny had a bug, she still seemed weak to him, and the reward was stingy, since even for the Dark Knight he was rewarded more generously. The system said that manipulating probability wasn't that hard. The guy said that he didn't expect anything worthwhile from her, but he was glad that he got a Katabi ticket with an SR item, and most importantly, he was able to beat Rinfel's record. At this time, the players that Ryuk had previously met at the entrance to the dungeon suffered another defeat. Some people didn't understand why they couldn't clear it, but the rest of the team told one guy that it was because he got lost, and they had to look for him. They also began to blame him for having no combat experience at all. Their boss did not like such discord in the team, and he began to calm them down by saying that this dungeon had long been impossible to pass, and he said that next time they would team up and go in there with another group. Suddenly they spotted Ryuk, and were surprised that he managed to hold out solo for 7 hours, and their leader thought that this guy just gave up and went home after that. He expected it, because you could tell from this guy that he didn't have the guts, and that he had realized the reality anyway. Suddenly, his words were interrupted by a notification of information about the dungeon, which had updated its data. The player leader was surprised when he saw that the rating was updated, and someone managed to complete this dungeon. And the first place was by a whole 17 hours and 20 and 30 minutes, which was as much as 10 hours better than the previous leader. Then they realized that the one they were mocking was the best in this ranking, but the players could not believe that this guy managed to beat Rinfel's record. Suddenly, one of the players accused Ryuk of cheating, because it simply couldn't be that he, alone, had broken the record. So he threatened him with his life if he did not tell them the truth. Ryuk easily said that there was a bug in the dungeon, which greatly reduced the time it took to clear it. This answer angered the other players quite a bit, because they did not understand how cheats could be used to change the game record. And the player who pointed his blade at him began to lecture him, which infuriated Ryuk. But despite that, he asked to leave him alone and concentrate on conquering the dungeon. But the player didn't like the fact that this guy just ignored him, and he wasn't going to leave it like that. Seeing the blade of the sword in front of him, Ryuk was able to easily dodge it. And then with a slight movement of his hand, he taught the scoundrel a lesson and silently left. The player got up and was still angry and started saying that he would kill him, but his team members asked him to finally stop this mess. The leader told him that the guy was not his opponent and that he shouldn't have behaved like that. But the player didn't like it and told the leader that he was just scared of the guy, which he didn't like, and he asked the player to finally wake up because Ryuk said that he only fixed a bug and didn't use it. The other team members didn't understand at first either, but after these words they realized that Ryuk didn't use bugs, but they still thought that it was impossible to deal with all the bugs that appeared in the dungeon alone. The leader said that this player looked very familiar to him, but he couldn't remember who he was. He probably remembered something about the Noon escaping from the depths of the sea and defeating the Dark Knight of Chaos. And this is what the Emerald Lake looked like. And these bright red motley thickets were called the Scarlet Spider Forest. And these hovering structures were the ancient ruins of the gods. Eating bread and looking at these pictures, the boy realized that these dungeons were among the famous first records of Rinfel and his team. Naturally, there were others, but he wanted to conquer these 3 places first. And the system was curious. Why? Then Ryuk answered that in one place there was another guild that set a new record 2 years ago. As for the record of the Archie team from the GAES guild, the time is very similar to what he predicted from the strategy he had previously created a long time ago. And he didn't like it at all, the guy told the system. However, he was going to conquer those 3 places to erase Rinfel's name from the rankings. At this time, Rinfel himself and his team were inside Jin's tower. He ordered his men to pack all their things as they had to leave. Besides, he was dying to get home as soon as possible. Suddenly, something distracted his attention. It was a huge ghostly kraken that looked very ugly. Then it occurred to Rinfel that it was on the Emerald Lake, but he was not quite sure, because it could have been the Scarlet Spider Forest. Afterwards, Rinfel told the team that everything from now on was on them, and that they should not leave anything there, because he had some things to do that urgently needed to be resolved. Returning home, resting, and looking at the statistics, he noticed something, namely that his records were broken one after another, and he had the feeling that this was an attempt at provocation. He thought Ryuki was planning to beat him. No matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't remember who this guy was. Rinfel then told the guy not to make such a noise anymore. In response, he heard the news that that same Ryuki was broadcasting live, And this girl was Ragnar, Lindsay's guild analyst, and she said that she had some predictions based on WAP, but she didn't expect that you could conquer 4 dungeons in a row and post a video about it. Dungeons such as the Witch's Dungeon Bug, Emerald Lake with its famous sea monsters, a scarlet spider forest with bloodthirsty giant spiders, ancient ruins of the gods with stone ghosts. This video has gained over 17 million views in just 3 days, setting a new record. So the guy attracted a lot of attention when he defeated the Dark Knight of Chaos solo, so it was expected by the guild. There were skills and items that the analyst Ragnar did not understand, but in her opinion, such movements were impossible unless one knew the structure of the dungeon by heart. And the most shocking thing was the strategy in the witch's hideout. After setting a record of more than 3 months, no one could clear it. And Ryuki7017 put on such a show and conquered him with such ease, which was amazing. There was a note that it was a composite video, but the fact that the witch's hideout had been cleaned up was an undeniable fact. To make this possible, one had to have the talent of a lazy analyst, and she was curious about whether some guilds supported this guy. She noted that this event caused a storm of indignation on all fronts, but it was incomparable to how he defeated the Dark Knight of Chaos. If you release 4 videos at once, they will probably make a big splash, but these were just the tip of the iceberg. Compared to this video, which shocked many, the system believed that this plan of the master was very different from the previous provocation, since after that, those people began to recognize the guy as their enemy, to which Ryuk replied that he was ready for this. The system suggested doing what he had planned after a short rest because it saw how out of breath the guy was, which Ryuki admitted, but he believed that if he gave those people even a little more time to think, his plan would fail. After all, 3 years ago, from that very day, his time stopped. It seemed to him as if all that was left was the emotions he experienced that evening, namely, despair and hatred, since the horses were his only reason for living until now. At this time, the guild was watching the same video in which the guy greeted everyone and said that he had previously posted a video called Escape of a No-Name from the Depths of the Sea, after which he told everyone his real name. Also, he regretted that he was not focused on capturing dungeons, but on the truth that I would like to tell everyone. When the employees saw that same guy for the first time, he seemed quite adequate. Then they heard this guy say that everyone might be wondering why he called his videos No Name. In fact, it wasn't surprising because he was unknown. They might also have been wondering why there was a no-name in the labyrinth who didn't have an account, probably because many of them couldn't believe it. After all, the account must have a silver rank or higher, and also pass the exam. And sometimes just a recommendation from the guild was enough. Watching this video, people thought that this guy was just a troll, since he did not have an account. Ryuk confirmed that sometimes a recommendation from a guild was enough to avoid having an account. After all, he was lucky enough to receive it, and he was not interested in whether people believed him or considered him a lie. At this time, Rinfo was also watching the video and reading the comments below it. He found it funny that people wanted to fight this no-name in the real world, because they were nobodies in their world. But then he heard from Ryuk that he became a no-name because of a false accusation, which made him nervous. And he wasn't going to sue for it because he knew that no one would believe him anyway. The guy also noted that despite this, he had another reason for distributing these videos. Then he said that Rinfo and the other fools from the guild must have watched it, and he wondered if they had forgotten his face when he fell into the abyss. After all, he had to go through hell, but now he was back. And after these words, Rinfo was terribly surprised. Ricky also noted that they should get ready because he would be coming for them soon. After that, people realized that it turned out that this guy's enemy was Lindis, and they were surprised by the huge number of views on his videos, and these top-secret organizations heard that this guy was currently under surveillance. The man suggested that it seemed he worked in Lindsay, and then he was fired, and all such data was erased. Gabriel probably worked on it, and the unknown was angry at Rinful, but unfortunately, the record that could put the guild at a disadvantage was erased. Secret organizations asked this man to keep an eye on Rinful Darius because he was a valuable candidate, but they also thought of him as just a middling guy pretending to be a leader. And this man was wondering what they were going to do, because he didn't think that Lindsay would ignore Ryuk in 7017. The organization said that they wanted to stay on the sidelines for now, since it was unlikely that they could decide anything at that point, and they decided to observe what was happening. This guy realized that this time he had to continue watching as usual, but he still wondered, could he handle this alone? But the secret organization said that everything was moving along a certain trajectory and it was too late. But this guy knew that in reality there were no restrictions and that everything could be done. So he decided that he would do whatever he wanted, but he wondered where his desire would lead him. At this moment, Guildmaster Lindsay mentioned what Ryuk 7017 had recently said about them, and he wondered what their relationship was to this matter. After all, it was true that he was once a member of his guild, but this guy was expelled due to an internal warehouse. People were interested in what this guy said about claiming Lindsay had falsely accused him, and they wanted to know if that was true. Then the head of the guild responded that this was not justified on his part. Then people reminded him that there had been many cases where, because of such accusations, many no-names had maliciously persecuted players. There were even rumors of collusion between Lindsay and the publisher of WAP. And to control the speed of its content, restrictions were imposed on capturing dungeons and issuing items. And the journalists wanted to know how the head of the guild could comment on these suspicions. He then told them not to let rumors cloud the truth, as it was just a ploy to disparage their guild. He also noted that they had already contacted people involved with Ryuk and had all the information about him. He even went live to tell everyone about it, that everything will soon return to normal. He knew Lindsay was determined to use all her powers to sue him, but they would not allow malicious rumors to be spread. Ryuk coming through her door, she said that the world was full of rumors about him, and she was pleasantly surprised that such a famous person came to Yorozuya. Ryuki replied that he didn't care what many people said about him. Still, he asked if he didn't think the old man's voice didn't fit this body, just like the last time when he was a boy. Ju Tenko said that he liked the voice, and that having a full-body prosthesis was a real pleasure. After that, he offered him something interesting. But Ryuk didn't need that, so he asked him to get his mods. This upset Ju Tenko, but he said that the mods he saw earlier were the only ones left. Ryuk thought he was lying, because he remembered very well his words about the fact that the clients who needed them were offered to take a test. And didn't that mean he was involved in the creation of the mod? And such assumptions from the guy surprised the merchant. And after that, Ryuk asked, what if he dealt with him directly? After all, the guinea pig came on his own, so there was no reason to refuse him. Then, smiling, Ju Tenko began to take something out of his pocket. He said that he was asked to give this if Ryuk came, and was told that if he mastered this mod, he would be able to meet him. Taking the mod, the guy was surprised by the arrogance of such a meeting. The system started scanning the disk and reported that this mod was mental nonsense. By influencing the visual system, with the help of which it was possible to obtain various information. However, it was more powerful than the mod installed, making it more dangerous. Ryuk said he wasn't against it, but he didn't like the idea of using it. Ju Tenko was very happy when he saw that the guy was not empty-handed, and he wondered what he had in the bag for him. The guy said that this magic stone dropped from the dungeon boss, and he asked him to deduct the commission for the mod, which Ju Tenko was ready to do with pleasure. He also noted that even if the guy was wanted, he could come to him at any time. Walking down the street, Ryuk realized that the cost of the magic stone and the income from his video on YouTube were not worth it. At that moment, the system could not help but offer to scroll the boxes a couple of times. But the guy replied that it was not the time for that, because he had to meet someone. The system did not believe that the master could have another meeting, and it thought that he was joking. After all, he had zero social skills. But there was the one with whom the meeting was scheduled. Ryuk did not expect that this guy would be so nimble. The system didn't understand what was going on? Who was this guy? After all, its master couldn't have had any friends. Garcia greeted Ryuk happily and asked how he was doing, but the boy didn't answer. Then Garcia pointed his finger at the Yggdrasil tree. He seemed to be very pleased with this meeting. After all, they also used to come to this place and spend time there. But Ryuk wasn't very happy with those memories, since a lot of time had passed. Garcia decided to ask if he could spare him a minute. Then, clenching his fist, Ryuk replied that he just wanted to talk to him. Garcia was glad about this and said that he should have contacted him a little earlier, and then he made a strange gesture behind him. He thought that what happened 3 years ago was really terrible, because at that time he didn't know what to do. After all, saving the unknown was a risk to life, and at that time, they were being watched by agents in suits. It was late, but Garcia still wanted to apologize. He also noticed that Ryuk's face stood out too much, so he suggested going to a safe place. The guy liked it and agreed. After all, he really was afraid of human eyes. Garcia wanted to apologize for his past sin. Namely, he truly regretted what happened 3 years ago. Ryuk admitted that it was difficult for him to accept his apology because he did not understand what the point of it was, and he wanted him to prove to him that he was actually sincere with him. Garcia then said he had a plan to get back to bronze. This intrigued Ryuk, and he was curious if it was possible. Garcia replied that if the plan worked, then anything was possible. He only warned that it would be difficult to pull it off in a short time. Earlier, Garcia was standing in the rain when Ryuki said something to him in surprise. The guy said that there was only a week left before his mother's operation, and then he asked him for help, because he was the only one who could do it. He didn't ask for anything else. All he needed was to pay for the operation, and he promised that he would definitely return the money. But Garcia then cruelly refused him and asked him to take his hands off him. And then he said that he was just a dirty no-name who didn't understand the situation. Then Ryuki was left in the rain asking for help. After all, he needed money for his loved one's operation. The day Ryuki came, he was told that he should be happy. A no-name could pay. After checking the body, he was asked to leave the premises immediately, as there was no place for unknown people there. And then he remembered Garcia's words, in which he called him a dirty no-name who didn't understand the situation. Garcia decided to ask why the guy suddenly became sad. Ryuki told him that he would give him some advice from the past. After all, he knew that Garcia was going to deceive him with such a dirty show. because the guy had previously found out what guild he was in, since he belonged to the Ratia space aliens locked in the labyrinth. Not long ago, the world in the labyrinth of their game was destroyed, and Ryuki believed that Garcia was in despair. He only wondered what he was going to do after that. Hearing this, Garcia was frightened and began to deny that such a thing could not happen. Ryuki said that no matter what happened between them in the past, he still didn't need his help. Suddenly, Garcia asked him not to leave and offered to sell him information about Lindsay. As a former member, he was surprised how the guy didn't know about it, that the guild leader was Rinfol's older brother, Darius. After that, he asked Ryuki if he was the one who made this strategic plan. Gabriel had told him earlier that although he was a newbie, the level of development was quite high. The ace who was before Rinfol Darius, and he considered this guy to be the absolute pinnacle of the Lindsay guild. And Garcia also considered Gabriel Darius a heartless blockhead. So he assumed that Ryuki would probably know how terrible that man was, and he was sure that he should listen to him. After all, he just wanted to discuss his plan. He asked to be allowed to use his channel for advertising, and this might require using certain content, but Ryuki wouldn't listen to him, so he destroyed the information about Lindsay. This surprised Garcia greatly, but Ryuki said that he didn't need such garbage information. Garcia began to speak differently after this, because of his plan he had to shamefully swear in front of him. Calling him a fool, he began to attack him. Ryuki completely forgot that Garcia was not the kind of person to talk to. The guy repelled his attack and grabbed the scoundrel. Afterwards, he was going to ask him an important question. Namely, did he want to die so much by going to such a thing? But without hearing an answer, the guy still let this impudent imposter go. And then he told him not to show his face to him again. At that moment, Garcia began to scream that the target had slipped away. Before he could even leave, armed men were already waiting for Ryuk at the entrance. They asked the guy not to make any sudden movements. But the guy flashed past, knocking down one of them. It was so fast that no one even realized what happened. After that, they started looking for him but came to a dead end. People did not understand where he disappeared to. At this time, the guy climbed one of the buildings, all thanks to the sprint skill, which gave him such speed. Ryuki immediately realized that this was the work of Gabriel Darius, who nevertheless took radical measures, which was surprising for the guy. After this, the system's nerves began to act up, and she wanted to ask the master what he was worried about. But the guy said everything was fine, he was just thinking a little. But now Ryuk knew what to do next, and for now he was going to return to WAP. Returning to the boss, he told Garcia that he had disappointed him, but he had trusted him. Gabriel did not expect to receive such an answer for his faith in this man. Garcia said he was very sorry, but he had information about Ryuk. He started saying that the guy was 25 years old, but Gabriel didn't let him finish because every time he opened his mouth, he let him down, which he didn't like at all. He wondered if Garcia really thought Lindsay couldn't know such information about her former employees, and then he said he wasn't there to listen to such trivial things. After hinting at the random box, Garcia said that this guy must have won the right to create an account using gacha, and Garcia asked for a chance to find out more. Gabriel said there was a record that the right to create an account had indeed been knocked out, but the bandits put it up for auction, where bidding was held. Moreover, there were no terminals available in the area where the boy lived, and he thought that Ryuki had an adherent, and so he hoped to get more detailed information from the people around him. Garcia was angry because enough time had passed since Ryuki became a no-name that he simply couldn't know who he was currently friends with. Gabriel told this Garcia that he had wasted his time without providing any help, and he considered him a very low person and a gambler, capable of selling even his friends for profit, even lower in status than a no-name. These words hurt Garcia because he really tried to help, and he was angry that Gabriel considered him to be of lower status than a no-name. Pouncing on him from behind, he told Gabriel not to look down on him. Suddenly turning around sharply, Gabriel unexpectedly disarmed the guy and dropped him to the floor. It was an attack of bronze on gold, which was a crime, and since there were many witnesses, he told Garcia not to think that he could escape punishment. After all, even despite the witnesses, Gabriel could have dealt with him in another way. By the way, he said that usually the attacker was sentenced to death, but he was going to have mercy on him. Namely, to lower the status to a no-name, which sounded extremely scary for Garcia. After that, the guy began to ask the head of the guild for forgiveness and to give him another chance. He burst into tears and said that he didn't want to be a no-name because you couldn't come up with a worse title. But Gabriel never answered him. Although this guy was a good analyst, he was nothing more and nothing less. Compared to Rinfol, he believed that he should be eliminated. And also Gabriel was of the opinion that there was definitely someone who made this guy so special, and he didn't care what methods he had to use because he was going to find out the secret of this unknown. This was the same village that Ryuk had visited earlier. One day, the most powerful lightning in history struck there. It was Ryuk who arrived there with the help of a rank R teleportation stone. But this teleportation feature only worked with this village. The system suddenly decided to ask the master when he would spin the gacha. After all, they were just lazing around all this time. But Ryuk was on his own wavelength. The guy said that it was not only the size of the village that was important, but also the number of players who had access to it. After all, there should not be too many, and not too few. This information was needed for the next step in his plan, because he wanted them to become witnesses. After all, the number of views has increased dramatically since he showed his face. Unable to ignore this, Lindsay will start acting openly. He was also competing with the top guild and the creators of WAP, and for the ace Lindsay, Ryuk was going to set a small trap. But still, the guy returned to the question about the system's random boxes and replied that it was high time to spin gacha. This time he did not go unnoticed because more and more people noticed him because they watched those same videos from the dungeons. And since there had been rumors about a no-name recently, many thought that this guy just decided to show off to them, and some thought that it was not worth approaching him at all because it could be a trap. At this point, Ryuki decided to look at his login bonuses and weekly missions, of which there were quite a few, namely 92 Yuguan tickets and 5 SR rank tickets, as well as about 9,000 RP points. The guy decided not to waste time on trifles and immediately start with 10 random boxes. As was customary, he didn't get any legendary items, not even a single SR. The system believed that they had no chance of influencing it. But despite this, the guy continued to spin the boxes, but since he only got N-rank trash, this frustrated him furiously. Since the drop rate of SR grade items was 3 and 6%, he thought that he would at least get a couple of items. The system asked its master not to despair, because no matter how bad the world was while he was alive, everything would definitely be fine. Ryuki agreed with this, and he said that he still didn't hope for anything. After all, he still had 5 SR rank tickets, and they were his favorites. SR ranked item called Phoenix Feather, which allowed him to revive once. The guy liked that it could save his life. Since he had no level and status correction, he could die even from one hit, so he was happy for such a gift. But that was just the beginning because he had 4 more boxes. Ruki was hoping that he would get a weapon or some kind of skill, SR rank electric toothbrush, and then the system loudly shouted that it was a success. She told the master that he was incredible because he constantly received ordinary brushes and finally knocked out the SR rank. Laughing through tears, the boy thought it was some kind of joke, and maybe this brush had hidden skills. The system responded with pathos that there was a star on the object, and it was a special brush that could be used in the real world. But the guy was interested in something other than this garbage information, and then the system said that if he uses it, his carries will disappear. In addition, it even worked on batteries, said with pathos. But Ryuki was angry, because this was not what he wanted to hear. The guy realized that if it came down to it, the rest of the items should have been used all at once. He thought it could increase the chance of something worthwhile. He confidently decided to do this, after which he opened the remaining 3 boxes. Ryuki prayed that it was a weapon he could use. He got 3 identical items, namely exactly the same swords and pistols, which really upset him because what were the chances of getting 3 identical items at the same time? Falling to his knees, he gathered a huge crowd that did not understand what was happening. Only one vacuum cleaner, swinging from side to side, laughed so much that its battery almost swelled. The players standing behind were already thinking about reporting the strange behavior of the no-name guild Lindsay. The vacuum cleaner told the guy that he had made him laugh a lot, so she wanted to tell him something nice, which immediately interested him. She said that by duplicating SR and higher items, he achieved the condition for unlocking the synthesis system. There were also a few more unopened systems, but she couldn't tell him the conditions for unlocking them in advance, so she asked him to put his efforts into doing it himself. The guy wondered why she laughed then, and she answered that she had a fetish for when her master failed, and she hoped to renounce it someday. The guy figured that out, and then he had to figure out what the synthesis system did. He realized that when you got the same box points, you could combine them for something more valuable. And to start synthesizing the pistol sword, he needed 10 ordinary N-rank blades. And for a more valuable weapon, he needed only 5 R-rank swords. SR, rank, sword pistol. He was glad about this, but he still wondered if there were any restrictions. Then the system said that there was none, but he had to add either 20 ordinary N-rank swords or 10 R-rank swords with 2 pistol swords added to get a rare blade. The guy did it, he managed to do it, Chumu was happy. After crafting that sword, he managed to get a sword pistol of SR rank, E-Ig, of the bayonet sword type, the shape of which compressed 3 energies per cylinder. After that, Ryuk was really happy, and looking at him, the system was worried about such a mental state. Now the guy had to improve the remaining skills, such as improving parry from level 4 to level 5, so that he becomes SR Yuguan parry max level. But suddenly Ryuku became curious. What would happen if he combined Yuguan's parry and Yuguan's swordsmanship? Then he saw a list of skill synthesis, which showed SR level Holy Sword, SR level Heavenly Blade, and SR level Sword God. Ryuk was unhappy that even here there was randomness, and he demanded that the system tell him which of the swords he could get. But in response, the vacuum cleaner asked, didn't the master get a thrill from this? After all, with the help of skill synthesis, he could further improve his initial skills and acquire stronger ones. Since there were other ranks, such as super, Ryuk wondered what his probability was. Then the system answered that 2%, but that was quite a lot. Then the boy realized that he was stupid when he asked the vacuum cleaner a question. He decided to take a chance and got a level 1 SR rank Holy Sword, which had the ability to automatically activate a level 3 Swordmaster and activate a level 3 aura. The Holy Sword wasn't such a bad reward, but the guy thought it was like a combination of normal skills, and then he noticed that his skill level had dropped. And then the system said that there was randomness here too, which pissed the guy off. But in any case, he knew the stage was set. But he wondered why Yuguan was so slow in experiments. While the guy was indignant, someone snuck up behind him. Seeing this, the system screamed. But it was already late, and some stranger put a sword to the guy and asked if he was Ryuki 7017. The guy was as calm as possible and decided to find out if Lindsay had sent him to him. But that stranger was insistent and was only waiting for an answer to his question. Ryuki said that he pointed a gun at a man in a village where it was forbidden, after which the stranger wounded him, which the boy did not expect. Looking at Ryuk, he told him that it was just a setting, which were made so that players could not kill each other. In other words, it was possible to inflict pain that would not lead to death. After that, the guy said that only Lindsay acted like that, and this method was good because the pain felt like it was real. The guy thought that the mask was useless because it was clear to him who sent him. After all, as soon as he declared war on Lindsay, he was immediately attacked, and while he was saying this, the stranger attacked him again, piercing him with his blade. And then he said that he should have been on guard from the moment the war was declared, because wherever he was, wherever he went, they were going to pursue him and constantly attack him. But despite the fact that the guy was wounded, he just laughed. The stranger did not understand such strange behavior and asked what was wrong with him. Ryuki then replied that he couldn't help but laugh because WAP was Lindsay's property. That's why they could do something so bold. The stranger said it was not the time to laugh because he was going to turn his laughter into a scream, after which he immediately attacked the guy, but he deftly dodged thanks to his sprint skill. And then he got close to the stranger, presenting his sword to him. And then he started laughing right in my face. What surprised the stranger greatly was that Ryuki then said that it was the number of preemptive attacks without which the system of the player attacked by the malicious guild would be ideal. Here the stranger pretended not to understand what was being discussed. At this time, Ryuki said that it was his turn to attack, and the players standing behind were shocked by what they saw, because this guy easily knocked over this stranger, despite his injuries. He asked the stranger where the pathos with which he attacked him was. After all, just a couple of minutes ago he had threatened him, but in response the guy only heard a moo. He understood that the stranger was experiencing violent sensations similar to what he felt from him, since the WAP defense system simultaneously reduced health damage and pain, but it influenced his attacks, which impressed the wanderer. The system told the boy that it had just blocked all signals to exit the village's system, and Ryuk told the wanderer that, as he had said, it was impossible to kill in the forbidden location, but one could still feel the endless pain from the constant attacks. But why should he tell him that? After all, these guys already knew it. After all, they themselves had done the same thing up until this point. Suddenly, the system whispered to the master that they were here, namely, the rest of the players from Lindsay's guild, who surrounded the guy from all sides. After which they gave Ryuk his final warning on 7017. The players politely asked him to leave the WAP system and hoped that this guy would leave his career as a player. And if he did not resist, they promised to make concessions on this issue. Ryuki didn't understand. What the hell concessions? After all, they contradicted themselves. Besides, he himself attacked him first, although Ryuk was silent. Guild player Lindsay thought that this guy had no mercy, although he heard that Ryuki was dangerous. He didn't expect it to be that dangerous. The guy got tired of this talk and told them to leave quickly. But in response, I heard from the players that it didn't work that way. And first of all, they noticed the sword pistol, which shouldn't be in the WAP dimension. And they wanted to know how he brought it into the world? Ryuki said that as soon as he took off his mask, he would tell him, and then laughed, because he knew that he couldn't do it. The player said that in any case it was probably a normal bug, and he just wanted to enjoy the game, and the little joys, and he didn't understand why he had to deliberately get into trouble, and after which he said that he was very sorry but his escape story would end there. And then he ordered his players to attack the guy from all sides. Ryuki understood that this is what it would come to, so he began to skillfully shorten himself from countless attacks at once. The player realized that the guy was too fast, but that was all. Ryuk then used his new Holy Blade, SR plus Yuguan. This surprised the player because the guy, before he even reached the tower, began to use the sword's aura, which used a lot of mana, which was hard for him to believe since it was rare to use such skills at such an early stage. Looking at the guy, he wondered if this was the same newbie who caused the mistake, and even with such an aura, which he had to cope with, when he struck it he saw a bright spark. Looking at the guy's agility up close, he doubted that it was really an aura that was destroying his sword. In the end, he was unable to cope with such an influx of power, and he simply flew to the side. Considering it impossible, how did this guy manage to do this? The player couldn't have guessed that, because Ryuk had the same skill as parry, and he thought it was worth waiting for its effect to wear off. Ryuki decided to assume that the player was probably thinking about prolonging the fight, but he told him that he didn't fully understand the situation. After all, his skills didn't consume mana, which he proudly reported. The players certainly didn't expect this, and Ryuk told them that if they wanted a long fight, then in principle it was fine with him, since it could serve as a little training. Since up until now, the guy had only fought against monsters and he wanted to practice with someone, which surprised the guild player Lindsay, just like other players of lower ranks. At that moment, Ryuki attacked one of the players and he fell to the ground, saying that this guy had hit his hand pretty hard. Their leader didn't like this and told them not to let this guy attack them, because he could ignore the defense. Afterwards, the leader asked all the members of the squad to gather, and at that moment, Ryuk saw Erendite, Grand Saber, even the Dark Moon Knight. These were all famous weapons, which meant that after taking out his favorite sword, the player leader no longer had any intention of hiding his identity. After all, the guy knew his name well, Double Swordsman, Cassius. The image of a handsome man and a gentleman, and although he was not as good as Rinfel, he had a fan club, and for Ryuk, it was unclear how he was going to ruin his reputation like this, which made Double Swordsman Cassius very angry, and he ordered the guy not to move. At that moment, he activated his illusion chains against the guy. And since physical attacks were forbidden, Dual Swordsman Cassius ordered his squad to attack with long-range attacks, after which they used the power of magic such as Magnum Shot, Rapid Lightning, and Dragon Breath. The players realized that they had figured out the guy's parrying skill. Now they had to hit him with all their attacks instantly. They were sure that he would not be able to cope with this, because he was bound by magical chains. But as Ryuk had guessed, the Divine Blade SR Plus was not just a show, and the system revealed that thanks to its power, it could even deal damage to a non-physical object. Although it was a little disappointing for Ryuk, because he was thinking about countermeasures for long-range attacks, but just swinging the sword, everything happened by itself. Looking at this, the squad leader swore. And then, with disappointment, he ordered all participants to attack again. Suddenly, after a couple of seconds, he fell to the ground and only the surprised voices of the participants could be heard, asking if everything was okay with him. After all, this was the first time the captain had taken a bullet, and he didn't feel like he had defeated the boss with one blow, like before. When the other participants saw the guy's weapon, they were surprised, because it simply couldn't be there. It wasn't in the WAP system. But no matter how you look at it, it was still a trigger, which could hold back a bunch of big monsters, but if the enemy was a human, then that was a completely different story. There were no firearms in WAP, and even the elite couldn't handle it. And Ryuk was curious, why would the Lindsay Guild players? The guy said that since they attacked him first, they would die from pain or shock. Then he began to carry out what he had planned. And at this time, one of the guilds watched all this in horror, believing that this could not have happened, blaming it all on the fact that it was a mistake. Otherwise, how can this be explained? But still, it became more and more interesting for them. The system reported that these people's evasion and defense were dependent on their status, so there were too many loopholes in their movements. How were they different from the master, who was always on the verge of life and death? She also said that she blocked them from logging out of the system, which was a shame, because they couldn't escape the pain. The guy understood that in any case, they were the best players in Lindsay's guild, and they had safety devices for mental protection. Suddenly, the guy saw a bright glow high in the sky, and then a strong lightning strike struck right next to him. The guy realized that this was someone's skill. He had previously had to watch it on video so often that he even got tired of it. And if you don't master the art of the spear, it will be impossible to learn it. In WAP, this was one of the rare long-range skills, and then he saw the meteor shower with his own eyes. This could only mean one thing, namely, a metastatic stone that could transport to another dimension, which is exactly what happened, and the guy simply disappeared in the middle of the village. And the players of lower rank stood in disbelief at what had happened. They could not believe that it was Lindsay herself. Even the head of the squad was surprised that he decided to come to them personally. Meanwhile, having appeared in another place, Ryuki had to run away from a strong source of energy. And as soon as he was at a safe distance, he realized who had decided to visit him. Appearing before the guy Rinfel, he said that it was unpleasant, of course, but by any chance he didn't have a gallery full of his photos there? He then said that since the love calls never stopped, he simply could not sit quietly at home. He was curious if the guy wanted to cause him trouble with such actions. The system suddenly noticed that the master's heartbeat had suddenly quickened, all because Ryuki had imagined this moment many times. He asked Rinfel to answer only one question. Did he recognize him? Surprised, Rinfel replied that he did not remember him, and it seemed to him that he simply wanted to attract his attention, and although he came there to look and remember him, he still could not remember this no-name. Rinfel wondered if this guy was really angry with him. Ryuki was surprised that Rinfel didn't remember the person whose life he destroyed. Rinfel asked to wait, saying the guy's name many times. Suddenly he exclaimed with a grin and said that he didn't remember anything like that. He asked the guy what was wrong. Was he disappointed? Upset? And then I wanted to know if he really thought that if he behaved like that, his heart would ache. Rinfel thought the boy was just trying to blame others for his misfortune, that's all. However, since he had come such a long way, he asked the boy not to disappoint him. Ryuki asked him not to worry because he didn't need his leniency, after which, taking his spear powered by mana, Rinfel began to approach the guy. Ricky was quite surprised by such speed, but the guy still managed to dodge his attack, which was quite handy, since after activation, Rinfel released a powerful stream of magical energy. Then he was amused by the fact that the guy managed to dodge. He said he would ignore it and destroy the guy anyway, even if he was a no-name. Seeing how Rinfel's attack destroyed everything in its path, the boy was extremely surprised by its power. He thought he could move on to the next attack, after which he entered into a fight with the deputy guild leader, in which everything sparkled and blazed. The guy was surprised because it was only the power of Rinfel's normal attack, and his speed was so high that he couldn't even catch the moment to parry, and all he did was try to intuitively block his blows. Suddenly, with a slight movement of his hand, Rinfel threw the guy aside, after which he said something about changing his mind, but Ryuki didn't understand what he was talking about. Rinfel said that for him it was just a little entertainment, as games have recently become a place to mine magic stones, since people used to like to play them for fun. And the fact that the no-name was so weak that he was just going to evaluate his abilities. However, when he came face to face, he wanted to understand what this guy was hiding, and he asked to entertain him a little. And swinging his spear, he accumulated mana and told Ryuk to try to get a high score. After all, he used his top-notch skill, Star Strike, against him. Ryuk felt like his wrist was broken at that moment, but he still somehow managed to block this powerful blow, which surprised him. SR plus Holy Sword Yuguona, which had a level 3 parry skill. And then he realized that when the parry was activated, for a moment he got a small chance, and it couldn't be missed. But Rinfel was getting closer and closer to him, and each of his normal attacks threw the guy back a few meters, preventing him from attacking each other. Ryuk was surprised that after losing his balance, he immediately counterattacked, and his attack was stronger than the Dark Knight's. There was no parrying skill like that in WoP, and Rinfel knew the guy was using funny stuff. But he didn't mind playing with him a little more, but he politely asked the guy not to break down. And then he immediately attacked him with his spear, and then Ryuki realized that there was no doubt that the parry effect was working. But the difficult task was that Rinfel had 2 quick transitions between attacks. And when the guy saw the effect of Rinfel's weapon, he was sure that he used the same material when he was an analyst. Rinfel suddenly told the guy to concentrate, because it would get even faster from here. He used the skill of the unique item Star Spear, and Ryuki understood that the more he attacked, the greater the speed. And although he had intuition and parry, but it was a disaster. As soon as the guy saw the right moment, he began to attack. He realized that an opportunity had arisen and it was worth acting immediately. When suddenly Rinfel pierced him with his spear, saying what a disappointment it was, and if he could hold on for another 3 seconds, he would break the record. In the end, the guy wasn't so good that he would remember him, but there was a plus. He had some fun in the fight with him. After that, he let him go, and the guy fell from high above to the ground. Rinfel considered this the end, and said that the guy had disappointed him, and then asked him not to provoke him with such pathetic abilities. And even if he wanted to die, nothing would come of it. Because, like the village where he fought Cassius, this place was also a forbidden gaming zone, and no matter how you look at it, there is not a single person there, only ruins. The system was so stupid that it recognized this as a village. But in any case, Rinfel could not leave the game at that moment. And he wanted to know, didn't the guy at that moment have the same power that supported him behind the scenes? And Ryuk replied that he wouldn't tell, but if he was so interested, he could have asked Cynthia about it. Then Rinfel was surprised to hear her name from a no-name, and he asked him if he knew where this girl was. This brought a smile to the boy's face, and then he asked, was he betrayed too? But this only made him angry, and he began to demand that the guy lay out everything he knew and not miss a single detail. Having taken out the item, Ryuk realized that for the first time his intuition was screaming so loudly. And while Rinfel wanted to know where this amateur was, Ryuk threw his small R-rank blinding flash drive. It was so bright that it made Rinfel lose his train of thought. I'd say it was a pretty good mid-throw. Rinfel was surprised and wanted to know what it was, but then he still devalued it by calling it trash. Suddenly Ryuki laughed, because he thought that someone else had taken advantage of Rinfel was funny news. He also said that he was going to beat the living daylights out of him, and there was no need for him to borrow someone else's help. Rinfel liked that the boy wasn't going to beg for mercy there, but he warned the boy not to regret missing his chance afterwards. Ryuki said that since he didn't remember him, he was going to make sure that he never forgot him. After all, up until this moment, he hadn't fought even at 50%. The system was surprised by such a statement. Rinfel was surprised that a no-name had time to say such absurd things. and the system asked the master not to regret it later, which the guy assured her that this would not happen. After all, he had long ago said goodbye to these useless emotions. Rinfel found it funny. He began to attack Ryuk again, and this time, he did not plan to spare him. The guy wanted to read his attacks with his intuition skill and buy himself some time. Rinfel attacked again, he activated the skill. But something went wrong, and a shockwave of incredible force was created. Ryuki didn't expect at all that during his skill, Rinfel would be able to switch to attack. Suddenly, before he could even move away from the previous time, the blade of Rinfel's spear was approaching the guy again. This time he managed to read the attack and stop it by force. Rinfel was glad that they were in the Forbidden Zone. After all, despite the fact that this guy managed to get to the point where everything ended too quickly, and he wondered if it upset the guy. But he didn't have time for that at that moment because he felt as if his right arm would be torn off. If he had dodged a little later, he would have lost the limb. Rinfel said that if they were in a normal village, the situation would be different. He liked this place very much because it was quiet and it was easy to engage in battles. Ryuka was irritated by his speech and asked him to shut up, and then using the sprint skill, he ended up behind Rinfel. But he only smirked at what the guy thought he was doing, which was not true. Turning around, he sharply reflected his attack with such force that Ryuki could not have expected. And then he told the guy that he would show him something interesting, namely, a first-class meteor shower skill, and this time there was much more mana there. And the guy also received more damage. Rinfel asked the boy if he thought it was weak. After all, he had said earlier that he would fight at 50%, but he thought that was the end. Or did the guy think that since he was the ace of the guild, he would be able to troll him? He asked him to show at least a little of that courage and continue the fight, because this would be a great chance to take revenge. Rinfel had already become disappointed in him because such a battle was not one of equality of forces. He didn't wait for the no-name to get up, so he simply threw him up with his magic. And then he said that it would end shamefully for him, and maybe he wanted to play some more? But since there was no answer, Rinfel used his top-notch meteor shower skill, and then a flash of light penetrated the boy. After a long flight, Ryuki landed on the ground, and Rinfel was already celebrating his victory. Suddenly, she was interrupted by a call from his brother Gabriel Darius, who asked to stop fighting and quickly return to the guild. This call made Rinfel nervous. He did not expect to be absent for so long, and he understood that he would get a slap on the wrist for this. Ryuk saw that he was already leaving, so the guy shouted for him to stay, which alarmed and surprised Rinfel, because he didn't expect that his attacks couldn't penetrate the guy's armor. Ryuki knew that if the pain he was inflicted with was real, he would have died from shock. Even if he survived, it didn't mean he couldn't avoid the consequences. But this wasn't a problem that could be solved by the power of the spirit. The system reported that the sensitivity adjustments were controlling the sensations, so it set the threshold to 50% of the minimum value. As a result, his movements became slower, and she wanted to remove it. She thought he was really crazy for deciding to enjoy the pain. After all, it was really dangerous. But Ryuki said that he had no other choice. He had to use all the chances. There was no other way but to constantly clash with each other. Rinfel was very impressed that it happened again. He wanted to know what kind of bug it was. He told the guy that it would be better if he didn't get up, but the guy only asked if he was afraid of Gabriel Darius. And what did he send him? But then Ryuki remembered that Rinfel was an ordinary pawn, because he would hardly have decided to come to him himself. And he guessed that Gabriel must have been as angry as a raging flame. After these words, the boy took out his N-rank rusty dagger. Rinfel felt that Ryuki was in complete despair, so he allowed him to say whatever he wanted. Suddenly, the guy's sword flew past his neck at great speed, and then a scream was uttered. Then Ryuki asked with a grin if he had let his guard down, and then the guy asked him not to scream like that just because he had gotten a small scratch. But if this was the first time he had ever experienced it, he congratulated him on it. He noted that no matter how effective the armor was in reducing injury and pain, his attacks did not follow these rules. Rinfel couldn't resist and called the guy a bad word. Then he assumed that it made him angry, but Ryuki asked not to worry, because he still had many such gifts. Then the guy started teasing him, enticing him with his finger and talking about an attack, which worked perfectly, after which the embittered Rinfel began to attack. But this time he failed, as Ryuk became dominant. What surprised him was that he didn't understand how this guy could read his attacks. He must have been badly injured, but what happened? The guy said that when he was an analyst, he studied Rinfel's style until he lost his pulse to improve his strategies. Basically, the patterns he used for combat, and even predicted the behavior of habits in combat. And at that moment, the boy learned that Rinfel had never experienced such pain, and his only mistake was that he lost concentration. Rinfel was pretty exhausted from his injury, and he wanted to finish the fight as soon as possible. Therefore, having thrown out magic, he was going to finish everything with one blow. He immediately used such skills as Supersonic Sonic Attack Acceleration, Super Strong Knuckles Attack Enhancement, Double One-Time Damage, 7 stars Critical Strike Increase, and all the techniques he had previously used only to attack the boss. This made Ryuk happy, as he was waiting for the moment when Rinfell would start using his special skills. All he could do was cut short and stay away from the arcade's restricted area, which was pretty easy to do in such an open area. Rinfell started chasing him and saying that he couldn't escape. But the guy decided to use his N-rank items and throw them away along the way, thereby delaying Rinfell. After all, if he couldn't avoid the attack, then he should have reduced the damage of the attack. So he threw out all the trash that fell to him from the gacha, which irritated Rinfell. And catching up, he shouted after him that he would not be able to stop his attack with such methods, because it only made him angrier and more powerful. And realizing that the spear was scratching his back, the guy was not delighted. After dealing a strong attack with his superpowers, Rinfell said that the guy had gotten to him already, and that he probably wanted to avoid a direct hit. But what was his chance of winning now? Rinfell asked. Ryuki, on the contrary, was delighted and grabbed the spear and said that this was his chance. Then, enraged, Rinfell told this no-name not to stain his spear with his blood. And the guy said that he would show him something interesting now, while Rinfell said not to talk nonsense and quickly remove his hands. That day the guy pulled out his first SSR, after which he experimented with Cereal's feathers, and in the video he cheated a little by calling it a skill. In fact, it was a skill and not an object. Therefore, holding the spear, in the guy's hands it began to shine with a bright flame, which caused misunderstanding in Rinfell, because it began to dissolve into small particles. It was all thanks to the SSR guy removal system, and Rinfell's spear simply disintegrated right in his hands, which surprised him greatly, because he had never seen anything like it. This rare item even disappeared from his inventory. There were no such item destruction systems in WAP, so he wondered why his weapon disappeared. He assumed that it was a hallucination skill and that this guy had done something. At this time, Ryuki held him at gunpoint, and then he attacked him with his blade pistol. The guy said he was aiming for the heart, but it turned out he had good reactions, like an ace. Rinfell just wanted to know what he did with his weapon. Ryuki told him that he didn't realize the situation he was in, because the weapon he was proud of no longer existed in this world because its data had been erased. This was the concept of delete, and to use this skill, you only had to touch the target for more than 5 seconds. The only limitation was that you could use this skill 4 times a week. Rinfell didn't know what this trick was, but he was sure that defeating the guy would solve this problem. The guy started to tick and told Rinfell to catch him, which angered him. And he said that he would catch this scoundrel and that he would not live. Suddenly, while catching up with the guy, something went wrong and an explosion occurred. Rinfell didn't understand what was going on, and then the flash hit him too, causing damage to him. At that moment, Ryuki said that it would be better for him not to make any unnecessary movements, because he had planted many more similar devices there, which surprised Rinfell. The guy said that he didn't hear it wrong, because there were traps everywhere. That's why he lured him there. Ryuk asked if Rinfell thought about the fact that he didn't know about this place, but he only began to use obscene language in response. Ryuki said that he had calculated everything in advance, namely how he would appear before him, where he would try to kill him, and so on, all after he declared war on them in that video. So he was well aware of this tasteless playground of Lindsay fools like him, and he assumed that Rinfell would take him there, so he prepared a small gift for him. So the guy was glad that everything worked out exactly as he expected, and now it was his turn to play with it. Rinfell was irritated by the fact that the guy was laughing at him, and he decided to attack him again. Suddenly, all the traps were activated, and there was a strong flash. Rinfell was getting more and more uncomfortable with this guy, because besides the damage, he also couldn't find him because of the dust. And when he saw a shadow in this thick pile of smoke, he immediately attacked straight at the head. How surprised Rinfell was when he realized that it was a skull, but not the current he was aiming at. As it turned out, Ryuki had set up a trap again to grab his weapon, and after 5 seconds, it began to disappear again. Rinfell was surprised that this guy managed to do this trick again and deprive him of his second weapon. He realized that this was no ordinary trick, and that the Star Spear could no longer be used. At this time, while he was thinking, Ryuki pointed his blade at him, and then he pulled the trigger and attacked Rinfell. Calling him a scoundrel, Rinfell said that he would still take revenge on him. At that moment, Rinfell began to exit this dimension, but something went wrong and the system crashed. And after Ryuki managed to pierce him with his blade, and Rinfell still couldn't understand why he couldn't get out, all because Yuguan had previously blocked his exit system. Ryuki began to laugh at the fact that the ace of the Lindsay Guild wanted to escape so shamefully. And then he put his hand on his face and said his name, while he was horrified and did not understand why he had not managed to get out. The guy said he used to be Lindsay's guild analyst and he wanted to know if he remembered him, but Rinfell said that there was no need for him to remember such things, because it was too meaningless information. Rinfell didn't quite understand what this guy was talking about. Ryuki then explained that, as a rule, one player only had one account, and if a player lost their account for some reason, they could never get it back. And some time ago he had a question. Can the delete skill really destroy account data? Ryuki wanted him to remember him well, since he couldn't remember who he was before, but Rinfell only told him to take his hand away. Then the guy started counting the time, which started from 5. Then he said the number 4, and Rinfell yelled at him to stop. Then the boy said the number 3, and then Rinfel began to remember how his brother had previously asked him to gather information about Ryuk in 7017 before his exile, who asked him to act with caution as he had a bad feeling. And then Ryuk said the number 1, and at that moment something in Rinfel's ear started ringing. And he said that he understood everything and asked not to lecture him anymore, but then Ryuki said the number 0. With his last words, Rinfel asked him to stop. But it was already too late, and his body simply disappeared from under the guy's arms. After which the system informed the master that everything was over, and that he had worked hard. But Ryuki was surprised at that moment that this was the end. He even got angry that everything happened so quickly. And after a few seconds he relaxed, because he realized that everything had just begun. After all, there were still 1 or 2 people with whom he needed to deal. And when he said that one of them was Gabriel Darius, there was someone hiding behind him. And he took out his very strange blade from under his robe, after which he went towards the guy celebrating his victory. Ricky couldn't do anything when it touched him. The guy just thought, where could a dagger come from in this world? After which he appeared in another dimension, and then the system asked if the master was okay. But the guy was just thinking, where could the teleportation come from, and who set up this trap in the portal? Suddenly, behind him, he heard words saying that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Afterwards, a portal appeared from which a man came out and called his name, and the guy wondered who it was. This man introduced himself as Arca from the Gaze Guild. Ryuki wondered if it was the guy from the guild that had made the top record in the dungeon. The man said that his real name was Arca, but there was another name he had used before, which perhaps it could have been familiar to him before. Pulling down her hood, the girl said that she thought they would never see each other again. When Ryuki saw this girl, he was in complete shock. He didn't expect that she would find him herself. After all, this is the same sweet girl who was in his guild and helped him. The guy couldn't even imagine that Cynthia would find him herself. As she said earlier, it was a fictitious name, and her real name is. Interrupting her, the guy started laughing so hard that he almost fell off his feet, saying rudely that he didn't care about her present. After all, she set him up, which is why he was expelled from the guild and made a no-name. And then she appeared before him, and no matter how much he thought about the reason, only one thing came to his mind. That Cynthia, or whoever she was, should have followed in Rinfel's footsteps. The girl said she had been keeping tabs on his whereabouts, but never thought he would become a player. The guy said that he and Rinfel were the bastards from Lindsay, and that he was always thinking about how to deal with them. If he hadn't had that goal, he would have died long ago, just like they wanted. The girl chose to remain silent and say nothing on this topic. The guy asked the girl to better explain why she decided to appear in front of him. Afterwards, Ryuk admitted that he desperately restrained himself from doing the same to her as he did to Rinfel. The girl admitted that he was very different from who he was 3 years ago, and she told him that he needed to forget the past and stop taking revenge on Lindsay. The guy asked with a grin and surprise, why? Then the girl said that if he kept silent, the Lindsay members would do the same. He should also think about his family because she only found out that day that his mother was no longer there, after which she asked for forgiveness. Ryuki was shocked when he heard this. The boy didn't expect to hear such news. He understood that the girl seemed eager to repeat Rinfel's fate, and if so, he was ready to fulfill her wish. He decided not to delay and to carry it out immediately. After all, it was a confined space and there was nowhere to run. Therefore, he could easily attack her, but the girl had special dexterity and was able to dodge. And then she ran to her blade, and this made the guy wonder if he had some kind of secret. The girl managed to run and grab her blade, but Ryuki had speed. He got ahead of the girl and snatched her blade. Then he swung his weapon to attack her. This attack was enough to ensure her the same future as Rinfel, but surprisingly, after the guy decapitated her, she told him not to think that this was the end. After all, she had never imagined before that he could complicate her task. This made the guy think, because it seemed like he had defeated her. But no, how did that happen? He didn't understand what it was. When she reappeared, the girl said that she had not intended to fight him, and she did not think that the victory at Rinfelem was a pure coincidence. The guy got angry and decided to do it again, but he failed, and the girl said that she did not intend to kill him, but she did not expect that he would be able to defeat Rinfel. Suddenly, the system warned the master that it was a lie. After all, when this player touched the dagger, a lot of data was transmitted, and the guy did not understand what she was talking about. Even though they were criticized for all sorts of insults such as bugs and cheats, when they finally saw the real thing, they became too resistant, but it was a man-made mistake. Rikyu said that he didn't care about such explanations, but in any case, the boy knew that he couldn't deal with her at that moment. The girl said that her goal was to destroy Lindsay, and although she didn't know what trick he used, she wondered if Ryuki would be able to handle Rinfel when he came back to life. After that, the guy grinned maliciously, and then he said that he would not stop taking revenge, and it did not matter what awaited him in the future. The girl thought that he would regret it, but the guy said that Rinfel would never appear in the labyrinth again, because he deleted his account and he even cried. The girl asked to explain what it meant, but the guy asked to keep quiet, or he would do exactly the same to her. After these words, the guy reappeared in the place where the battle with Rinfel took place, saying that they had caught him. He didn't know if it was a mistake or something like one, but if their goal was to attack, then he believed that he had been defeated. Also because the girl had that unknown dagger. He didn't know if that contact with him was a trigger condition. Ryuki thought he shouldn't have touched it. What was strange was that he didn't feel any discomfort from it. However, the guy wanted to find out more information and find an ally. Ryuki wondered if Yuguan had finished what they had discussed earlier, to which he replied to the master that he had. Reverse data detection and connection was complete, which made the guy happy, after which he asked if the creator of the mod had heard him. The bear didn't understand how the guy managed to get in touch with him. The guy said he knew he had installed a backdoor into a mod he bought on the black market, and that he had managed to hack his vision for spying. The bear was surprised that the guy managed to notice this, and he wanted to immediately close this access. But the guy told him that it was useless, and then asked a question. Didn't he see how Rinfel and Cassius couldn't log out of the system? The mod creator said he was very sorry and that he had no ill intentions. But Ryuki said he didn't care if it was malicious or not. He wanted to know, even though it was just a test, was he going to control him? But the bear didn't know what to say from shock. Then the guy asked to show him his face for a minute, and then he could forgive him. He told him to come to Yorozuya tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, but if he wasn't there, he would delete all his data, which scared the mod creator. He understood the guy and decided to ask him one question. He was wondering when he was fighting Rinfel. The signal went out for a moment and the bear wanted to know if it was his doing. The guy at that moment was thinking about how he couldn't sense Cynthia when she was close to him, and he considered it too dangerous a bug. So he wanted to deal with her, and he asked the bear if he was capable of asking such questions, and then he told him that if he didn't want to become like Rinfel, then he should have kept his mouth shut and not caused him any trouble. That evening, the boy came to the merchant in Yorozuya, with words about being offended because despite the fact that he came, the bear did not appear, and he was wondering if the trader was ready to make a deal with him. Jutenko didn't understand what the guy meant. After all, the creator of the mod was already there, didn't he see it? Tenko asked. Ryuk said he wasn't in the mood for jokes, and if he was hiding something he should have spilled the beans right away. When suddenly he heard words from the creator that he was there. It was a bear who said that he was the creator of mods and was happy to meet him. When the guy saw this toy, he thought it was some kind of joke. When he grabbed him, he told him that there was no need to be angry anymore because he could start all over again. But the bear asked the guy not to press so hard because he could break him. Ryuki asked him not to worry because it wouldn't come to that. Suddenly the guy saw that Jutenko was lying there as if unconscious, and wondered what was going on. Then the mod maker replied that he should have just shown him everything directly, rather than explaining it, because that was why he hadn't moved his body for a while. And the person who was talking to him at that moment was the creator of the mod. His name was Suzuki 5555, and earlier Jutenko had talked to him, and he was wondering if it was time for the guy to let him go to make a deal. Ryuki noticed that the bear's voice had changed abruptly, and he was curious as to who was behind it. The system reported that there was no doubt that it was the same creature. It turned out that it was possible to programmatically control one's personality, using multiple full-body prosthetics. Ryuki wanted to know why he bothered so much with his identity then. Tenko noticed that his visitor was indeed very perceptive, and that he did not look like the prosthetic body from last time. But before they got down to business, Suzuki wanted to congratulate him on defeating Rinfel, but he was still curious. How did the guy get such an ability? Ryuki noticed that the bear's voice changed every time. Was it Suzuki 45's? He told the bear that he didn't have to answer him, and first he wanted him to reveal his true identity. Suzuki admitted that it was better than his explanation, and he believed that the delete skill should have been hidden from prying eyes. The boy thanked him for the advice, but it was too late. Suddenly, the system reported that the video editing was completed, namely the video of the fight with Rinfel. The guy thought that the video of their fight was posted uneducated. Suzuki was surprised by the guy's statement. He thought he was crazy, and then he asked about whether he hadn't realized that Lindsay would gather all her strength to attack him. The guy replied that this was exactly what he wanted, because this way Lindsay would show everyone that they were afraid of no-names, who were looked down upon. Suzuki wondered if there was any point in that at all. After all, the guy was already in the crosshairs. Ryuki didn't quite understand what he meant, but the bear asked him to stop because he didn't want to talk about unpleasant things. Jutenku told the boy that for Suzuki, questions that weren't related to his activities were too troublesome. And then he wanted to show them something interesting, namely, a live video that covered a radius of 100 meters. This was a very useful thing for identifying people who were targeting his store. There they saw the Black Mamba people, located at a distance of 47 meters from them. Ryuki was surprised that these guys were still there, planning some mischief again, but suddenly he realized that it was just a bait, because these guys were most likely the real employers. Afterwards, he saw the Iron Blood people at a distance of 47 meters, and wondered who they were. Jutenko said that it was a fairly large organization that made money from shady dealings in the red light district, and the likelihood that they were dealing with Lindsay was extremely low. After all, the boss had long since left the game due to an accident, and there were rumors that Lindsay's guild was involved. Ryuk understood, but he thought it was stupid to explain about the efforts to those who destroyed him, and the boy wanted to know how all this related to the merchant's true identity. Ju Tenko said that this should have been discussed in a safer place, since the guy was being followed. Ryuki understood that whether it was Jutenko or Suzuki, each prosthesis had its own purpose, and this was exactly what he needed, because earlier he was looking for a partner who would help him achieve his goal. Jutenko said that the basement of the store was connected to the sewer of the entertainment district, and they were in a safe place, and after the system scanned the place, Ryuki was convinced of the merchant's words. Going deeper, the guy did not understand what was in front of him, and Jutenko said that it was a warehouse where they collected prostheses and goods. In this place were his greatest masterpieces. The system had no doubts about human technology because it was of excellent quality, which it noted. But Ryuku was not interested in such things. The guy was most interested in what the merchant's name was, Jutenko, or Suzuki. The merchant said that he could call him Suzuki when he was a hacker, but suddenly he realized that words probably wouldn't convey the whole point. But anyway, before they made a deal, he wanted to explain who he was. His name was Anonymous. His age was over 20 but under 30, his gender was female, and unfortunately, that was all he knew. Which surprised Ryuki, because how could he not know who he was? The guy assumed that he developed schizophrenia because he spent too much time with his personalities. But Ju Tenko, after the guy's suggestion, only asked whether he knew about the explosion of Boeing 707. People thought it was a plane crash with no survivors. But in fact, only one person remained alive, who was a simple piece of coal, unable to identify himself or speak. This guy had surgery in a research lab and some stranger gave him a complete prosthesis. After this story, the system realized what terrible creatures these people really were. Ryuk wondered if the merchant was the survivor. Then he said that to be more precise it was Vashira. At the moment of the accident, all his memories were mixed up. He didn't know the soul of the victim or anyone else, but now he was just artificially controlling all the personalities, so he didn't know other details. Ryuki decided to believe him, and then ask him what kind of deal he was planning to make with him. In response to this, Jutenko threw him some book, which Ryuki caught without understanding why he needed it. Suzuki decided to find out if the guy could add him to the Lindsay and Ratia guilds too, and then he asked if they had seen this video of the story of the escape from the depths of the sea in part 6, in which there was a raid on Lindsay's guild and the hunt for Rinfel Darius. Ryuki wondered if deleting data was a scam. After all, he had seen the uploaded video and it was fake. After all, an unknown fool had attacked there hundreds of times for which Rinfel wanted to sue him, and the deletion skill was simply a fake. And if it was a lie, shouldn't Rinfel have just told the truth? At that very time, Rinfel himself was sitting in his office drinking drinks. He was angry because he couldn't accept that a no-name could trick him like that, and also about the fact that his account was deleted, along with all the accounts. And now, being a no-name, he considered himself a useless brother and the ace of the guild. But despite this, he asked his older brother to give him another chance. But he didn't understand how to give it to someone who ignored his warning, went to fight alone, and ended up losing his account. Gabriel told him that there would be no more chances from now on. Rinfel admitted that he had simply relaxed, for which he regretted, and asked his brother to create a new account for him. He said that from now on, he would do as he was told. After all, he was sure that there must be a way, for example, stealing another player's account or the right to create a new one. Darius couldn't believe his brother was saying such things. He thought it was ignorance, and he was ashamed that they were of the same blood. He then explained that there was typically only one account per person and that it was impossible to restore an expired account. After that, he called security and told his brother that it was time for him to go, and then Darius asked not to disturb him anymore. Rinfel considered his brother's words to be untrue, because the Nunem also became a player. The guy was horrified at that moment, realizing that this was the end for him. He told the guards to take their hands off him because he didn't need their help. Darius didn't like this and kicked his brother out because he was tired of listening to his complaints, so he asked him not to come anymore. Rinfel thought it was stupid because Darius couldn't even look him in the eye normally at that moment. Suddenly, behind his back, a young man asked for forgiveness and asked if he was Rinfel, Darius. He also replied that if he was homeless, he could have looked for another goal, and even if that wasn't the case, he had no time for that at that moment. But the gentleman only laughed in response, calling Rinfel homeless, and then said that he had come to help him. After all, it seemed to him that this guy could use their strength. Showing Ryuk's photo from 7017, the gentleman asked if Rinfel wanted to hear his story.